Norma Jackson, a 73-year-old widow, pours her heart into hosting a grand Thanksgiving for 28 family members, expecting a joyful reunion. Exhausted from days of preparation and 350 in expenses, she creates a feast to meet everyone's demands, only to realize her family sees it as content for social media, not a shared moment. As guests rush off after 90 minutes, leaving her with dishes and disappointment, Norma uncovers Sarah's Instagram posts glorifying the meal while ignoring her sacrifice. A painful truth emerges. Her love has been exploited. What will Norma do to reclaim her worth? The answer will shock you. If Norma's story moved you, please subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more powerful stories that spark change. Hit that subscribe button, share this tale, and join us tomorrow for another inspiring story. Let's build a community that values truth and connection together. The phone call came on a crisp November morning, shattering the stillness of my modest kitchen. I was nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee, the steam long gone, while puzzling over yesterday's crossword. The name on the caller ID, Sarah, sent a familiar jolt of warmth through me, the kind that only a call from one of my children could spark. At 73, those calls were rare treasures, glimmers of connection from my grown kids, whose lives spun in orbits far busier than my quiet, predictable days. I answered with a smile, setting aside my pen, ready to soak in whatever piece of her world she'd share. "Mom, hi," Sarah's voice chirped through the line, bright but laced with that subtle edge of urgency I'd come to recognize. It was the tone she used when she needed something, though she'd never admit it outright. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "Never too early for you, sweetheart," I replied, my voice softening instinctively. "How's everyone? Marcus? The kids?" "Oh, everyone's great," she said, her enthusiasm bubbling over. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. We've been talking and we want to do something really special for Thanksgiving this year. Something big, traditional, like the old days. And Mom, we all agreed nobody does Thanksgiving like you did when we were kids." Her words hit me like sunlight breaking through a long winter's gloom. For 3 years since my Robert passed, the holidays had been a shadow of what they once were. The house, once alive with laughter and chaos, had grown heavy with silence, like a museum of memories no one visited anymore. Sarah and her brother Michael had their own families now, their own traditions. Most Thanksgivings I'd spent alone or with Robert's sister Ellen, whose company was kind but never quite filled the hollow spaces. The idea of a house full of family again, of voices and footsteps and the clatter of dishes, stirred something deep in me, a longing for purpose, for the warmth of being needed. "That sounds wonderful, dear," I said, my heart swelling despite the faint flicker of worry creeping in. "What did you have in mind?" "We were thinking you could host at your place," Sarah said, her voice brimming with excitement. "Like when Dad was still here. The whole family together, all your incredible food, everyone around your dining room table. Marcus's parents want to come, and his sister Jenny with her family, and of course Michael and Lisa with their kids, maybe even a few close friends who don't have family nearby." My mind raced to keep up. I pictured my dining room, cozy but small, its table barely big enough for 10, even if I dragged out the folding chairs from the garage. My kitchen, once the heart of our home when Robert and I bought this place 45 years ago, now felt cramped even when I was cooking for myself. 20, maybe 25 people, Sarah said casually, as if it were no different from the potlucks of my younger days. The thought of that many bodies in my house, laughing, talking, filling the air with life, was thrilling, but it also sent a shiver of doubt down my spine. Could I still pull something like that off? "How many are we talking about exactly?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, not too many," Sarah said breezily. "Maybe 20, 25 at most. Nothing you can't handle, Mom. You used to cook for crowds like that all the time when we were growing up." I swallowed hard, my excitement entangling with a growing knot of anxiety. 25 people. I could already feel the weight of it. The hours of chopping, stirring, baking, the oven running nonstop, the fridge packed to bursting. But then I imagined the house alive again. The way it used to be when Robert's booming laugh would echo through the rooms when the kids were little and their cousins tore through the backyard. I could almost smell the turkey roasting, hear the clink of glasses, feel the warmth of a family that hadn't gathered like this since his funeral. That image pushed my doubts aside, at least for the moment. I don't know, honey, I said, hesitating. That's a lot of cooking, and I'm not as spry as I used to be. Mom, come on, Sarah laughed, her tone teasing but insistent. You're in better shape than most people half your age. And we'll all help, I promise. It'll be a family effort. We just need you to take the lead, you know? Be the heart of it all, like you always were. The heart of it all. Those words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, soothing an ache I hadn't fully acknowledged. Since Robert's death, I'd felt like a ghost in my own life, drifting through days that blended into one another. The casseroles and condolence cards had poured in at first, but as the months turned to years, the world moved on. My children called when they could, but their lives were full. Careers, kids, soccer games, mortgages. I understood. I'd raised them to be independent, after all, but understanding didn't make the quiet any easier to bear. Sarah's words, her belief that I could still be the center of something meaningful, lit a spark in me I hadn't felt in years. What would you need me to make? I asked, already flipping through mental recipe cards, picturing the worn index cards in my recipe box, stained from decades of use. Oh, you know, all the classics, Sarah said, her voice practically glowing. Turkey, of course, maybe two, just to be safe. Your cornbread stuffing with sausage and apples, the green bean casserole with those caramelized onions you do, and your mashed potatoes. Nobody makes them like you, Mom. And the sweet potato casserole, homemade cranberry sauce, not that canned stuff. Oh, and your dinner rolls, they're legendary. I grabbed a notepad, scribbling as fast as I could, my mind already calculating oven space and cooking times. 2 turkeys? That would mean starting at dawn, maybe earlier. The stuffing alone took hours, with the cornbread to bake from scratch and the apples to dice. The green bean casserole required slow-cooked onions, and the cranberry sauce needed time to simmer into that perfect balance of tart and sweet. What about dessert? I asked, sensing she wasn't done. Oh, definitely your apple pie, Sarah said without missing a beat. And that pumpkin cheesecake you used to make. Maybe some of those pecan tarts too. Oh, and Marcus loves your bread pudding with the bourbon sauce. He's been talking about it nonstop. My head spun as I tallied the dishes. 2 turkeys, stuffing, mashed potatoes, green beans, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, rolls, apple pie, cheesecake, pecan tarts, bread pudding. That was already a dozen dishes, and she wasn't slowing down. And maybe some appetizers, she continued. Your spinach and artichoke dip is always a hit. Those little meatballs you make, the deviled eggs. Oh, and we should probably have some lighter options too. A salad, maybe some roasted vegetables. Sarah, I interjected gently, my voice tinged with exhaustion just thinking about it. That's a lot of food. Are you sure we need all that? Mom, we want this to be perfect, she said, her tone firm but pleading. We want everyone to remember this Thanksgiving forever. Nobody cooks like you, and besides, leftovers are the best part, right? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the list in front of me. My Social Security check barely covered my monthly bills. Utilities, prescriptions, the occasional trip to the grocery store for basics. Feeding 25 people, even with frugal planning, would cost hundreds of dollars. The price of butter alone had nearly doubled since last year. But Sarah's excitement was infectious, her voice brimming with a rare enthusiasm for something we'd share together. It had been so long since I'd felt this needed, this central to their lives. I suppose I could manage, I said slowly, but the grocery bill's going to be steep for all this. There was a pause, a brief silence that made my stomach twist. Then Sarah's voice came back, reassuring. Oh, Mom, don't worry about that. We'll all chip in for groceries. This is a family effort, remember? Nobody expects you to pay for everything on top of doing all the cooking. Relief flooded through me, loosening the knot in my chest. Of course they'd help. Sarah and Marcus both had good jobs. She in marketing, he in tech. Michael's construction business was thriving, and Lisa's part-time work as a realtor brought in extra. It made sense they'd pitch in for a feast we'd all enjoy. The thought of their support made the task feel less daunting, almost possible. Okay then, I said, a smile creeping into my voice. I think we can make this work. When do you want to do this? Thanksgiving Day, of course, Sarah replied. Dinner around 2 o'clock. That gives everyone time to sleep in and work up an appetite. I nodded to myself, already mapping out the timeline. To have everything ready by 2 a.m., I'd need to start the turkeys by 4 a.m., maybe 3 kwas to be safe. The prep work, chopping, mixing, baking, would need to begin days in advance. My fridge would need reorganizing, my counters cleared. It would be a marathon, but the thought of the house buzzing with life again made it feel worth it. This is going to be amazing, Mom, Sarah said, her voice practically vibrating with excitement. Everyone's so excited. Marcus's mom has been telling her friends she's getting a real Norma Jackson Thanksgiving. You're like a legend in our family, you know that? A legend. The word wrapped around me, warm and unfamiliar. When was the last time I'd felt like more than a footnote in their lives? When was the last time anyone had looked to me for something beyond a quick phone call or a holiday card? I could feel the corners of my mouth lifting, even as my mind churned with the logistics. I'm excited too, sweetheart, I said, meaning it. It'll be wonderful to have the house full again. Oh, and Mom, Sarah added almost as an afterthought, could you make sure the guest bathroom is clean? Maybe put out some nice hand towels? Marcus's parents are particular about that stuff. Of course, I said, jotting it down. And maybe move some furniture around in the living room to make more seating. We want everyone to be comfortable. Whatever you need, dear, I said, my voice steady despite the growing weight of her requests. You're the best, Mom, Sarah said, her tone warm but distracted, like she was already moving on to the next thing. I'll call later this week to go over details and send you a final head count once everyone confirms. When I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my kitchen, staring at the notepad filled with my scribbled plans. The house felt too still, the silence heavier than before. But beneath it, a flicker of anticipation burned. For the first time in years, I felt a purpose stirring, a chance to bring my family together, to be the heart of something again. I didn't yet know that this Thanksgiving would unravel everything I thought I understood about love, sacrifice, and the family I'd spent my life serving. For days, I sat with my pen hovering over the list I'd begun, its lines sprawling across the page like a map to some daunting yet exhilarating destination. The house, once heavy with the stillness of routine, now buzzed with a restless energy, as if it too sensed the shift. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a spark of purpose ignite within me. This wasn't just a meal, it was a chance to weave my family together, to fill the empty spaces left by time and loss with laughter and warmth. I wandered through the house that morning, imagining it through the eyes of 25 guests. The dining room, with its faded wallpaper and scuffed table, would need a deep clean to shine again. The guest bathroom, with its threadbare towels and chipped sink, begged for a refresh. And the kitchen, oh, the kitchen, would have to become a model of efficiency, a command center for the feast I envisioned. I pictured borrowing folding tables from the church to seat everyone, maybe setting up a special table in the living room for the kids, where they could giggle and spill without worry. The thought made me smile, a flicker of joy cutting through the weight of the task. That afternoon, I drove to the grocery store, not to buy yet, but to scout. I roamed the aisles, jotting down prices, calculating quantities in my head. 2 turkeys, each around 18 to 20 pounds, would anchor the meal. 15 pounds of potatoes for creamy mashed mounds. 3 dozen eggs for deviled eggs, their yolks whipped to perfection. The numbers loomed large, almost overwhelming, but the thrill of the challenge drowned out my nerves. This was going to be the Thanksgiving, the one my family would talk about for years, the one that would remind them I was still here, still capable of creating something extraordinary. That evening, I called my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, Eleanor, my rock since Robert's passing. Her friendship had been a lifeline, born from shared loss and her refusal to let me sink into despair. Widowhood had carved similar hollows in our windows, but where I sometimes teetered on the edge of grief, Eleanor's no-nonsense attitude kept me grounded. 25 people, Norma? Her voice carried that familiar, skeptical edge, sharp but kind. That's not hosting a dinner, that's running a restaurant. Are you sure you're up for this? I laughed, though doubt crept in, curling around my confidence like smoke. It'll be fine, I said, more to convince myself than her. Sarah promised that everyone will pitch in. Eleanor's silence was heavy, and I could almost see her raised eyebrow through the phone. Pitch in how, exactly? She pressed. I faltered, trying to recall Sarah's exact words. Well, they'll help with groceries for sure, and I'm certain they'll lend a hand with us setup and cleanup. It's family. They wouldn't expect me to do it all alone, would they? Eleanor's pause stretched longer this time. Norma, I love your kids, you know that. But when was the last time Sarah helped without you having to ask her a dozen times? She's got her hands full with her bum and those teenagers. But you're not exactly sitting either. You're at the food bank twice a week. You're on the church hospitality committee. You drive Mrs. Patterson to her appointments because her eyes aren't what they used to be. Your time's worth something, too. Her words stung, not because they were unkind, but because they were true. I felt a spark of irritation flare up. Eleanor's pragmatism could feel like a bucket of cold water on my enthusiasm. This is different, I insisted, my voice firm. This is family. I want to do this. I need to. The need in my voice must have reached her because her tone softened. All right, honey, but promise me you'll ask for help if it gets overwhelming. And don't let them walk all over you. I promised, but even as the words left my lips, I knew I wouldn't follow through. Asking for help felt like admitting weakness, and I wasn't ready to show my children I was anything less than the mother who could make everything perfect. The next morning, I dove into planning with a fervor that bordered on obsession. My dining room table transformed into a war room, covered with lists, shopping lists, cooking schedules, cleaning tasks. I pulled out my old recipe cards, their edges worn from years of use, and started scaling up quantities. 3 cups of flour for 1 batch of dinner rolls became 9 for 3 batches. But would that feed 25 hungry mouths? Better make it 4, just to be safe. I spent hours online diving into articles on cooking for large groups, watching YouTube videos on Thanksgiving prep, absorbing tips on how to time multiple dishes so everything hit the table hot. My notebooks multiplied, pages filled with scribbled calculations and ideas, some jotted on the backs of envelopes when I ran out of space. The house felt alive again, vibrating with the anticipation of what was to come. Sarah called again on Thursday, her voice bright with updates that sent my list sprawling further. Mom, great news! Marcus's cousin Derek is coming after all, and he's bringing his new girlfriend. So that's 27 people now. Oh, and Marcus's mom is trying to eat healthier, so maybe add a roasted vegetable medley. And Derek's girlfriend is vegetarian, so we'll need some vegetarian options too. My pen froze mid-note. Vegetarian options? I hadn't even considered that. What did you have in mind? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, I don't know, Sarah said breezily. Maybe a vegetarian stuffing? Or a nut roast or something. You'll figure it out. I scribbled furiously, my list growing longer, more unwieldy. Sarah, we need to talk about the grocery bill, I said, my tone cautious. I priced things out yesterday and we're looking at close to $400 for everything. Her silence was telling. 400? That's a lot, Mom. I swallowed my frustration. It's a lot of food, honey. 2 turkeys alone are nearly $80, and that's if I find them on sale. She hesitated. Let me talk to Marcus. Maybe everyone can chip in. What were you thinking, like $50 per family? I nodded, though she couldn't see me. That would cover most of it. But Sarah's response was sharp. 50 per family seems steep, Mom. I mean, we're already giving up our whole day to come over. Her words landed like a punch, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Giving up their day? I thought they wanted to be here, that this was as much for them as it was for me. I pushed the hurt aside. Of course, dear. We'll figure it out. Then almost as an afterthought, she added, oh, and Marcus's dad has dietary restrictions I forgot to mention. Doctor's orders. No heavy salt or butter. So maybe keep some dishes lighter? Lighter dishes. My mind spun. My mashed potatoes, rich with butter and cream, were a family favorite. My green bean casserole, fragrant with herbs and spices, was a labor of love. How do you cook for 27 people, juggling vegetarian needs, low-sodium diets, and everyone's expectations, without losing the soul of the meal? I'll do my best, I said, my voice quieter than I intended. After hanging up, I sat at my dining room table, surrounded by my lists, and felt panic creep in. What had I taken on? But then I glanced around the house, the empty chairs, the silent rooms, and the alternative felt worse. I'd rather be drowning in chaos than wading through loneliness. The requests kept coming. Sarah called to ensure coffee and tea would be available all day, not just with dessert. Michael, my son, asked for his beloved cornbread stuffing, but mentioned Lisa was avoiding gluten. So could I whip up a gluten-free version? Marcus called to request extra gravy, both white and dark meat, because his family devoured it. Each call added weight to my lists, each request making the task feel like a mountain I wasn't sure I could climb. Yet, with every call, I felt their reliance on me, their trust that I could make this day perfect. It was daunting, but it was also everything. I started shopping a week before Thanksgiving, focusing on non-perishables and freezable items. My cart groaned under the weight of canned goods, flour, and sugar. The total at checkout, $327, making my heart race. Even though I'd braced for it, fresh ingredients would push the cost higher still. Back home, the house began to transform. I rearranged furniture to carve out space, borrowed tables and chairs from the church, polished silver that hadn't gleamed since Robert's funeral. I cleaned with a zeal I hadn't felt in years, scrubbing baseboards, washing windows, organizing closets in case someone needed to hang a coat. The physical work was exhausting, but it felt like reclaiming my home, my role, my purpose. On Saturday, Eleanor stopped by and found me in the kitchen, surrounded by mixing bowls and measuring cups, kneading dough for 3 types of pie crust. "Norma, you look like you're about to collapse," she said, her eyes soft with concern. "When did you last sit down?" My back ached, my hands cramped, but I waved her off. "I'm fine, I want this to be perfect." She frowned. "Perfect for who? Are you enjoying this?" I paused, the rolling pin still in my hand. Was I? The endless lists, the mounting costs, the pressure to meet every request, it was crushing. But then I pictured Thanksgiving Day, my house brimming with family, the air thick with the scent of roasted turkey and fresh rolls, the sound of laughter filling the rooms. I was needed, vital, the heart of this gathering. "I'm enjoying the anticipation," I said, and in that moment, I meant it. At last, I had something meaningful to occupy my days. As I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the chaos of preparations, a quiet thrill pulsed through me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was needed, not just for small favors or fleeting conversations, but for something grand, something that demanded every ounce of my energy and skill. Yet, as Eleanor studied my face with that piercing, empathetic gaze of hers, I felt a familiar unease creep in. Her eyes seemed to see straight through my carefully constructed facade, and I had to resist the urge to turn away. "Honey, son," she said softly, her voice warm but firm. "You're important whether you're cooking for 27 people or just yourself. You know that, don't you?" I nodded quickly, forcing a smile. Of course I know that. But the words felt hollow, like an echo of something I wanted to believe but couldn't quite grasp. Deep down, a nagging doubt gnawed at me. When was the last time someone had called me just to hear my voice? Not because they needed a ride, a recipe, or a favor. When had anyone sought my thoughts on something that truly mattered? Not just the weather or what to bring to a potluck. When had I last felt like more than a checkbox on someone's to-do list, a pleasant duty to be fulfilled and forgotten? The questions swirled in my mind, heavy and unanswerable, as I busied myself with chopping vegetables, hoping the rhythmic motion would drown them out. Eleanor's concern lingered in the air, her brow furrowing as she leaned closer. "I'm worried about you, Norma. You're taking on too much." Her words were gentle, but they carried a weight that made my chest tighten. I waved her off, trying to sound confident. "It's just one day, Eleanor. One meal. I can handle it." But even as I spoke, my eyes drifted to the kitchen around me, countertops buried under bags of flour, bowls of dough, and scribbled lists. Days of preparation had already left their mark. My back ached from hours of standing, my hands cramped from kneading and stirring, and a quiet voice in the back of my mind whispered doubts I didn't want to hear. Could I really pull this off? I pushed the thought away, focusing on the task at hand, but the uncertainty clung to me like damp November air. The Monday before Thanksgiving, I made my final trip to the grocery store, the weight of the week settling heavier on my shoulders with every step. My cart overflowed with fresh vegetables, crisp green beans, vibrant carrots, fragrant herbs, along with cream, eggs, and butter so rich it practically glowed. The dairy case alone set me back $67, a number that made my stomach lurch as I watched the cashier scan each item. Standing in the checkout line with my second cart of the week, I mentally tallied my expenses, wincing as the total climbed higher and higher. My monthly budget was stretched thin, but it was too late to turn back now. Invitations had been sent weeks ago, tables borrowed from neighbors, and the menu meticulously planned down to the last garnish. In 4 days, 27 people would fill my home, their eyes bright with anticipation, expecting a Thanksgiving feast that would linger in their memories. And I was determined to deliver, no matter the cost, to my wallet or to myself. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, my final timeline spread out before me like a battle plan. Every dish was accounted for: cooking times, oven temperatures, serving schedules. The turkeys would go in at 3 a.m., their golden, crispy skin the centerpiece of the meal. The pies, pumpkin, pecan, and apple, could be baked the night before, their aromas already teasing my senses as I imagined them cooling on the counter. Vegetables would be prepped on Wednesday, chopped and ready to roast or simmer. This was no ordinary dinner. It was the most logistically complex challenge I'd ever tackled, a high-stakes performance where every detail had to be perfect. As I finalized the plan, exhaustion tugged at my eyelids, but my heart raced with a mix of dread and excitement. I fell asleep with my lists on the nightstand, my alarm set for 3 a.m., dreaming of a house filled with laughter and gratitude. In my dream, Sarah, my daughter, wrapped her arms around me, her voice soft with awe. "Mom, you're amazing," and she said, "I don't know how you do it all. I'm so lucky to have you." The vision warmed me, but a faint whisper of doubt lingered, asking what would happen when the guests left, the dishes were washed, and the house fell silent once more. The alarm's shrill cry jolted me awake at 3 a.m., shattering dreams of burning turkeys and empty tables. My body groaned in protest as I dragged myself out of bed, joints stiff from yesterday's marathon of chopping and rolling pie crusts. The house was dark, the November chill seeping through the old windows Robert had promised to replace years ago but never did. In my bathrobe and slippers, I shuffled to the kitchen, flicking on lights that cast harsh shadows over the organized chaos I'd created. The sight should have been reassuring, everything in its place, prep work done, timelines taped to the refrigerator, but instead it overwhelmed me. 27 people would descend on my quiet home in just 12 hours, their voices and expectations filling the space until it felt like it might burst. I wasn't sure I could meet their needs, but I couldn't let them see that. The turkeys sat in their roasting pans, pale and massive, like silent challenges to my ambition. One weighed 22 pounds, the other 18, and they'd been thawing in my refrigerator for 3 days, crowding out everything else. I'd had to store other ingredients in coolers on the back porch, a logistical puzzle that had kept me up late the night before. My hands trembled slightly as I removed the giblet packets and began seasoning and stuffing the birds, my fingers clumsy with fatigue and the early signs of arthritis. Robert used to help with the turkeys on the rare occasions we hosted large gatherings. He'd steady them while I worked, cracking jokes about wishbones or presidential turkey pardons to ease my nerves. Now, alone, I wrestled with the heavy birds, my back aching as I bent over the counter, my fingers fumbling with the trussing twine. The absence of his laughter stung more than I wanted to admit. By 4:30 a.m., both turkeys were in the oven, and I allowed myself a brief moment to sit with a cup of coffee. The kitchen was warming, the rich scent of roasting meat filling the air, and for a fleeting second, I felt a spark of pride. I'd started well. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by the relentless ticking of the clock. 16 other dishes awaited, each with its own demands. The stuffing came next, 3 versions to satisfy everyone's needs. Michael's favorite, a traditional cornbread stuffing with sage sausage and tart apples, brought a faint smile to my face as I pictured his delight. Lisa's gluten-free version, made with rice bread that cost $12 for a single loaf, reminded me of her grateful hugs from past dinners. And then there was the vegetarian version for Derek's girlfriend, whose name I still couldn't recall despite her presence requiring an entirely separate set of dishes. As I sautéed onions and celery, diced apples, and crumbled cornbread, my mind wandered to simpler Thanksgivings. When Sarah and Michael were young, we'd host 8 or 10 people at most, Robert's parents, my sister, and her husband, a neighbor or two. Cooking was a joy then, a shared effort filled with laughter and taste testing. I remembered Sarah at 12, insisting on helping with the mashed potatoes, only to get distracted by the Macy's parade and scorch them into a lumpy mess. We'd laughed until tears streamed down our faces, then sent Robert for instant potatoes, which we dressed up with butter and cream and served as Sarah's special recipe. When had cooking for my family stopped being a celebration and started feeling like a test I couldn't afford to fail? By 6 a.m., the stuffings were ready, waiting for their turn in the oven. I moved on to the sweet potato casserole, peeling and chopping 10 pounds of potatoes until my fingers were stained orange and my shoulders burned. The kitchen was a battlefield now, every burner occupied, every inch of counter claimed by ingredients or finished dishes. I thought about calling Sarah, longing to hear her voice and maybe ask for help with the final preparations. But it was 6 a.m., and she'd mentioned just yesterday that she planned to sleep in since they didn't need to arrive until 2 p.m. Sleep in. The phrase felt foreign, a luxury I hadn't known in years. My food processor struggled with the sweet potatoes, wheezing and leaving lumps I had to smooth out by hand, my muscles cramping with every stir. At 7:30 a.m., Eleanor let herself in through the back door, her key jangling softly. "Dear God, Norma, what time did you get up?" she asked, taking in the chaos of my kitchen, the sweat on my brow, the way I leaned against the counter to catch my breath. 3, I muttered, focused on trimming green beans. "Had to get the turkeys started." Her eyes softened with concern. "You look exhausted already and you've got 7 hours to go." "I'm fine," I said, the words automatic now, though we both knew they were a lie. "I just need to pace myself." Eleanor poured herself coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the only clear surface left. "What can I do to help?" she asked, her voice gentle but insistent. The question hung between us, heavy with unspoken truths. I wanted to accept her offer, to let someone share the burden, but everything was so precisely planned. Every dish, every minute, every dietary restriction accounted for. Explaining it all would take more energy than I had, and the fear of someone doing it wrong loomed larger than my exhaustion. "I've got it under control," I said, my hands shaking as I snapped green beans. But Eleanor's silence spoke louder than words, her gaze heavy with worry as she watched me push myself to the edge. The weight of my ambition pressed down on me like a physical force, a relentless reminder of my own foolishness. Maybe she was right. Eleanor, with her quiet wisdom and her knowing glances, had warned me I was taking on too much, chasing some pointless validation that no one but me cared about. But it was too late to turn back now. 27 people, now 28 thanks to Sarah's last-minute addition, were counting on me to deliver a Thanksgiving feast that would live up to the glowing memories of years past. I was determined to give it to them, even if it left me in pieces. By 9:00 a.m., the kitchen was a battlefield, fragrant with the warm, golden promise of roasting turkeys. Their rich, savory aroma curled through the house, conjuring images of family gathered around the table, laughter, and the kind of love that only a shared meal can summon. But beneath that comforting scent, I was unraveling. 6 hours of relentless motion had taken their toll. My feet throbbed in the sensible shoes I'd chosen for practicality, each step sending a dull ache up my legs. My back howled in protest every time I bent to check the oven, a sharp reminder of my 73 years. My hands, raw and stinging from endless chopping, stirring, and washing, bore the marks of my labor. 2 small nicks from the peeler, Their tiny beads of blood quickly rinsed away under cold water that left my fingers numb. The mashed potatoes loomed before me like a mountain. 15 pounds of russets had seemed reasonable when I'd scrawled it on my meticulously planned list, but now, standing at the sink with a peeler in hand, it felt like a cruel joke. Potato after potato, the pile grew, each one a testament to my stubborn determination. My hands trembled, not just from the cold water, but from the creeping realization that I might have bitten off more than I could chew. The rhythm of peeling was meditative in its monotony, but it also gave my mind too much space to wander, to worry about the 27, no, 28 plates I'd need to fill, the expectations I'd set for myself, the fear that I'd fall short. "Let me help with those," Eleanor said, her voice soft but firm, as she rose from the kitchen table. She'd been pretending to read the newspaper, but I knew better. Her eyes had been on me all morning, tracking the growing desperation in my movements, the way my shoulders slumped a little more with each passing hour. "No, I've got a system," I replied, my voice sharper than I intended, though my system seemed to be moving at the pace of continental drift. I forced a laugh, trying to lighten the moment, but it came out hollow. "Besides, you don't know how I like them cut." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, her lips twitching with the hint of a smile. "I think I can figure out how to peel a potato, Norma." But I couldn't let go. Not even for something as simple as peeling potatoes. What if she cut them too thick and they didn't cook evenly? What if she left a stray eye or didn't peel deep enough and Sarah or Marcus noticed the imperfection? What if they sat at my table, eating lumpy, uneven potatoes, and wondered why I hadn't been more careful, more capable? The thought was unbearable. This meal was my proof that I was still here, still vital, still the woman who could hold a family together with a perfectly executed feast. Eleanor sighed, recognizing the stubborn set of my jaw, and didn't press further. Instead, she stayed close, quietly refilling my coffee cup or fetching ingredients from across the kitchen. Her presence was a lifeline, even if I couldn't bring myself to grab it. She saw me, really saw me, struggling under the weight of my own expectations, and though she thought I was crazy for doing this to myself, she didn't leave. That small act of loyalty, of simply being there, kept me from falling apart entirely. At 10:30, the phone rang, cutting through the haze of my exhaustion. Sarah's voice, bright and cheerful, came through the line. "Hi, Mom, just checking in. How's everything going?" I glanced around the kitchen, a disaster zone of potato peels spilling over the edge of the garbage can, dirty bowls and utensils piling up in the sink, and my sweat-stained shirt clinging to my skin. Every muscle ached, and my hands shook slightly as I gripped the phone. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile into my voice. "Right on schedule." "That's great!" Sarah's enthusiasm was a knife to my heart. "We're so excited. Marcus has been talking about your bread pudding and all week. You are making the bread pudding, right?" The bread pudding, my stomach dropped. I'd meant to make it yesterday, but the day had been swallowed by pie crusts, vegetable prep, and 100 other tasks that had seemed manageable on paper but had ballooned into chaos. I'd forgotten entirely. "Of course," I lied, my voice steady despite the panic clawing at my chest. "Just putting the finishing touches on it now." "Perfect. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Marcus's mom is bringing her friend Ruth. She didn't have anywhere to go for Thanksgiving. And you know how you always say there's room for one more at your table? One more. 28 people now. My dining room was already a logistical nightmare, tables and chairs crammed together in a way that defied the laws of physics to seat 27. Where was I going to put Ruth? "That's fine, dear," I said, my voice tight. "The more the merrier." "You're the best, Mom. We'll see you at 2. Oh, and could you make sure to have some wine glasses out? Marcus is bringing a couple bottles of wine, and you know how particular he is about having the right glasses." Wine glasses. I hadn't even thought about wine glasses. I had 8, maybe 10 at most. Nowhere near enough for 28 people who might want a glass of wine with dinner. "Of course," I said, my mind racing. "I'll have them ready." After I hung up, I stood frozen in the middle of my kitchen, the first real wave of panic crashing over me. Bread pudding, wine glasses for 28, an extra place setting I had no room for. It was nearly 11:00 a.m., and I had 3 hours to finish 16 dishes, transform my house into a space that could hold more people than it was ever meant to, and somehow keep myself from collapsing under the weight of it all. What did she want? Eleanor asked, though I was sure she'd overheard enough to guess. Nothing important, I said, avoiding her eyes, just checking in. Eleanor's look told me she knew I was lying, but she didn't push. Instead, she turned to the sink and started washing the mountain of dishes I'd been too overwhelmed to touch. I wanted to protest, to cling to the illusion that I had everything under control, but the fight had drained out of me. I let her work, grateful for the small relief it offered, even if I couldn't admit it out loud. The next 2 hours passed in a frantic blur. I threw together the bread pudding with day-old French bread and a custard base, praying it would bake properly in my already overcrowded oven. I set up a card table in the living room for the extra guests, draping it with a tablecloth that didn't quite match the dining room's, but would have to do. I counted and recounted place settings, rearranged furniture to carve out every inch of space, and tried to figure out how to stretch serving dishes meant for 8 to feed 28. The cranberry sauce bubbled on the stovetop, its tart, citrusy scent mingling with the rich aroma of the turkeys. The green bean casserole sat assembled, waiting for its turn in the oven. The dinner rolls rose in their pans, golden and perfect, promising a moment of triumph if I could just hold it together. But inside, I was crumbling. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, whether from exhaustion, too much coffee, or the raw anxiety coursing through me, I couldn't tell. My back burned from hours of bending, lifting, and stirring. I'd been on my feet for 9 hours straight, and the real work, coordinating the final cooking, timing everything to come out hot and perfect, serving and hosting with the grace my family expected, was still ahead. At 12:30, I glanced at my timeline and felt my heart sink. I was behind. The turkeys needed to come out to rest, but the stuffing wasn't ready to go in. The potatoes were boiled, but not mashed. The vegetables were prepped, but not cooked. 90 minutes left, and I was moving through molasses, every action sluggish and heavy. Eleanor must have seen the despair in my eyes because she set down her dish towel and walked over to me, her voice gentle but firm. "Norma, you need to call Sarah and ask for help, right now." "I can't," I said, my voice cracking. "They'll be here soon anyway." "They could be here now if you asked them to come early. You don't have to do this alone." But I did. Asking for help felt like admitting defeat, like confessing that I wasn't enough. This Thanksgiving was my chance to prove that I was still valuable, still capable, still worth the effort of including in their busy, vibrant lives. Failure wasn't an option, not when 28 people were counting on me to deliver perfection. "I'm fine," I said, the words tasting like ash. It was the biggest lie I'd told all day, and we both knew it. By 1 o'clock, I was mashing potatoes by hand, my electric mixer having sputtered out after the third batch. My arms felt like rubber, and the potatoes were turning gluey from overworking, but I couldn't stop. Guests would arrive in an hour, and nothing was ready. The turkeys rested under foil, their golden brown skins a small victory amidst the chaos. The stuffing bubbled in the oven, its edges crispy and fragrant. But I still had to make gravy, cook the vegetables, warm the rolls, plate the appetizers, and somehow make myself look like I hadn't been through a war. Eleanor, bless her, had stopped trying to reason with me. She'd taken over whatever task she could without waiting for my permission. Arranging appetizers on platters, filling water glasses, folding napkins with a quiet efficiency that was the only thing keeping me afloat. I caught a glimpse of myself in the oven door's reflection at 1:30. My hair was escaping its bun, strands plastered to my sweaty forehead. My face was flushed, my shirt stained with splatters of who knows what. I looked exactly like what I was. A 73-year-old woman who had taken on more than she could handle and was barely holding it together. There was no time to dwell on it. The first guest would arrive any minute, and I still had to carve the turkeys, finish the gravy, and transform the chaos of my kitchen into the seamless abundance my family expected. As I stood at the stove, stirring gravy with one hand and checking the oven with the other, a question gnawed at me. Was this what love was supposed to feel like? This bone-deep exhaustion, this trembling anxiety, this desperate need to prove my worth through service and sacrifice? Somewhere deep in my heart, I knew something was wrong with that picture, but I was too tired, too committed to the performance to figure out what it was. The doorbell pierced the air at exactly 2:00, a sharp jolt that sent my heart racing, thudding against my ribcage like a trapped bird. 28 people were moments away from crossing my threshold, each one expecting a miracle of warmth, tradition, and perfection. I was determined to deliver, even if it meant pushing myself to the brink. My hands, trembling from hours of work, fumbled to smooth my hair, the strands already rebelling against their careful pinning. I wiped my palms on my apron, its fabric marked with the evidence of my morning's frenzy. Flour smudges, a splash of gravy, the faint red of cranberry sauce. I summoned the smile I'd practiced in the mirror, one that promised everything was effortless, everything was flawless, everything was under control. But behind that smile was a storm of doubt, exhaustion, and the desperate hope that I could live up to their expectations. Opening the door, I was met with Sarah, her phone already raised, capturing the moment before I could even say hello. The flash felt like an interrogation, highlighting every wrinkle in my apron, every strand of hair out of place. She stood there in her crisp cream sweater, in tailored slacks, looking like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Behind her was Marcus, his button-down shirt and khakis pressed to perfection, a picture of calm I envied. Their teenagers, Emma and Josh, hovered behind, their slumped postures and bored expressions radiating a wish to be anywhere else. An elderly woman, Ruth I presumed, a friend of Marcus's mother, stood quietly, her elegant shawl and neat bun making me feel even more like a frazzled imposter. They were dressed for a fine dining experience, not a family dinner in my modest home, and the contrast twisted my stomach with a pang of inadequacy. Sarah paused, her phone still poised, her eyes sweeping over me. "Mom, you look," she hesitated, searching for words, "like you've been working so hard. This is going to be so authentic, so homey." The words landed like a slap, though I knew she didn't mean them to hurt. Authentic, homey. I'd spent 11 relentless hours chasing something extraordinary, something that would make them feel cherished. And yet I stood before them looking like a weary cook instead of the graceful host I'd imagined. The compliment, meant to be kind, felt like a reminder of my failure to measure up. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing my voice to stay light. Come in, I said, and then stepping aside to let them pass. "Everything's almost ready." The house at least was ready, or close enough to pass muster. The dining room table glowed under the soft light of the chandelier, set with my best china, its delicate patterns gleaming, and the mismatched silverware I'd spent hours polishing until it shone. The living room, extended with a card table, was transformed into a scene of autumnal warmth, thanks to Eleanor's help with the decorations. Small pumpkins nestled among scattered leaves, each one placed with care to evoke the season's embrace. The air was rich with the aroma of roasted turkey, savory stuffing, and a dozen other dishes, weaving a tapestry of abundance that I hoped would wrap my guests in comfort. Sarah's eyes lit up as she stepped inside, her phone clicking relentlessly. "Oh, wow, Mom, this looks incredible," she said, her voice brimming with awe. "Marcus, get a shot of me with Mom by the table." Before I could protest, I was pulled into her photo shoot, my aching body screaming for rest as I forced a festive smile. Sarah directed me like a film director. Stand straighter, smile bigger, look more joyful, while Marcus obediently snapped picture after picture. "These are going to be perfect for Instagram," she said, scrolling through the images with a triumphant grin. "My followers are going to lose it over this spread. #blessed, #family traditions, #homemade everything." Her excitement was palpable, but it left me feeling like a stage prop, my exhaustion invisible behind the curated perfection of her social media feed. The doorbell kept ringing, each chime bringing a fresh wave of guests. Michael and Lisa arrived with their 3 young children, a whirlwind of noise and energy that filled the house with life. Marcus's parents, Barbara and Frank, followed, their familiar smiles carrying the weight of years of shared history. Then came Derek with his girlfriend, Melody, her name offered in a shy introduction that I barely registered. A stream of vaguely familiar faces from past family gatherings followed, each one exclaiming over the table, the decor, the sheer spectacle of it all. They wanted photos, endless photos of the table, the pumpkins, me. I smiled, posed, and played the role of the perfect grandmother. But each flash of the camera felt like a demand to keep performing, to prove my worth through this carefully orchestrated moment. No one offered to help. No one asked if I needed assistance in the kitchen or if the final preparations were overwhelming. They assumed the meal would appear as if by magic, a feast conjured without effort or struggle. My legs wobbled from hours on my feet, and I slipped away to the kitchen, where Eleanor was stirring the gravy with a steady hand, her focus a quiet anchor in the storm. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice soft but piercing, as if she could see the cracks I was trying to hide. "Fine," I said, the words slipping out like a reflex, though it was a lie. My head pounded, my hands trembled, and a strange detachment settled over me, the kind that comes when you've pushed yourself too far. "I just need to get everything on the table." "I can help carry things out," Eleanor offered, her tone gentle but resolute. "No, I should do it," I insisted, clinging to the image of myself as the one who presented the meal, who delivered the magic they all expected. "They're expecting me to do it right." Eleanor's gaze held a quiet challenge, but she didn't press. Instead, she helped me load platters and dishes, her calm efficiency turning the chaos into something manageable. When the moment came to carry the food to the dining room, I braced myself, my heart pounding with a mix of pride and dread. The turkey, golden and glistening, drew gasps and murmurs of delight from the gathered family. The stuffing, mashed potatoes, sweet potato casserole, and green bean casserole followed. Each dish met with a flurry of photos, compliments, in wide-eyed wonder at the sheer abundance. "Norma, this is incredible," Barbara said, her voice warm with admiration. "I can't believe you did all this yourself. When Marcus said you were cooking everything, I thought he was exaggerating." "It was nothing," I said, the lie bitter on my tongue. "I love cooking for family." But the truth was heavier, days of planning, sleepless nights, and a quiet fear that it still wasn't enough. The seating was a challenge, the main table packed with adults while the teenagers and younger children spilled onto the card table in the living room. They laughed it off, treating the makeshift setup like an adventure, but I felt a pang of guilt that it wasn't more seamless. I took my place at the head of the table where Robert once sat and looked out at the faces of my extended family. For a fleeting moment, I felt grounded, surrounded by the people I loved, the center of something vital and meaningful. Marcus stood, his wine glass raised, his voice cutting through the chatter. "I'd like to make a toast," he said, and the room fell silent. "To Norma, who has outdone herself today. This spread is absolutely incredible, and we're so grateful for all the work you put into making this day special." The room erupted in agreement, glasses clinking, voices calling out my name with thanks and praise. For a moment, I basked in the warmth of their gratitude, the rush of validation I'd been chasing. But as they sat down to eat, that glow faded. The conversation swirled around me, a lively current of work updates, school stories, and neighborhood gossip. The food disappeared at an alarming rate, 28 people devouring dishes that had taken days to prepare. I barely ate, too busy hovering, refilling water glasses, fetching forgotten items from the kitchen, ensuring everyone had what they needed. "Mom, sit down and eat," Sarah said, noticing me with the gravy boat. "Everything's perfect." But I couldn't sit, couldn't relax, couldn't shake the weight of responsibility for their comfort. Every empty dish felt like a personal failing. Every request for seconds sent me scrambling. Every compliment felt like a test I had to keep passing. The teenagers at the card table were glued to their phones, barely touching the food or joining the conversation. The younger children fidgeted, more interested in playing than eating. The adults were lost in their own worlds, the meal a backdrop to their socializing rather than the heart of the gathering. I watched Melody pick at the vegetarian dishes I'd made just for her, leaving most of it untouched, and my heart sank. Frank reached for the regular mashed potatoes, ignoring the low-sodium version I'd prepared for his health, and I felt a quiet sting of rejection. Several guests snapped photos of their plates, more focused on documenting the meal for social media than savoring it. "Norma, you have to give me the recipe for this stuffing," Jenny, Marcus's sister, said, her voice bright with nostalgia. It's just like something my grandmother used to make. Of course, I said, though I wondered if she'd ever attempted herself or if the request was just polite chatter. I'll write it down for you. And the sweet potato casserole, Barbara added. I've been trying to recreate my mother's recipe for years, but this is even better. More requests, more promises to share recipes, more compliments that felt warm but fleeting. They loved the food, appreciated the effort, and enjoyed the moment. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough, that I wasn't enough. The weight of their expectations, their gratitude, and their casual disregard for the labor behind it all pressed down on me, a quiet ache that lingered long after the plates were cleared. The dining room, once a canvas of my meticulous planning, now bore the weight of a fleeting celebration. I stood at the head of the table, my heart a tangled knot of pride and exhaustion, watching my family savor the meal I'd poured my soul into creating. The golden turkey, roasted to perfection, the creamy mashed potatoes, the vibrant green beans with slivered almonds. Every dish was a testament to days spent in the kitchen, nights spent dreaming of this moment. But as I scanned their faces, a quiet ache bloomed in my chest. Did they truly grasp what this feast had cost me? Not just the hours, the money, or the physical toll, but the fragments of myself I'd woven into every bite. Did they sense the love, the hope, the desperate wish for connection that had driven me to orchestrate this day? As the meal unfolded, a subtle unease settled over me, tightening my stomach with a familiar anxiety. My family ate with a mechanical rhythm, their forks moving swiftly, their bites quick and purposeful, as if they were already halfway out the door. Conversations, when they happened, were fragmented, interrupted by furtive glances at phones or watches. The atmosphere, though warm on the surface, lacked the intimacy I'd envisioned. It felt efficient, transactional, not the lingering laughter-filled gathering I'd dreamed of. I'd pictured us stretching this moment into the evening, with candles flickering low, dessert plates piled high, and stories flowing freely. Instead, the air hummed with a restless energy, a silent countdown to their departure. Ruth, a last-minute guest who'd barely spoken all afternoon, broke the silence. "This has been absolutely wonderful," she said, her voice polite but distant. "But I should probably head out soon. Early day tomorrow." Her words landed like a stone in my chest. Head out? It wasn't even 3:30. I'd imagined this day spilling into dusk, with coffee refills and shared memories binding us together. The thought of people already planning their exits stung, a sharp reminder that my vision for this day wasn't theirs. "Oh, dessert hasn't even been served yet," I said, my voice betraying a desperation I hadn't meant to reveal. "I made apple pie, pumpkin cheesecake, pecan tarts, and bread pudding." I listed the desserts like a plea, hoping to anchor them to the table. Sarah, my daughter, smiled kindly. "Mom, that sounds amazing, but we're all so full from this incredible meal. Maybe we could just take some dessert to go." To go. The words echoed in my mind, each one a small betrayal. I'd spent 2 days crafting those pies, rolling dough until my hands ached, perfecting the lattice crusts. The bread pudding was Marcus's special request, a recipe I'd tweaked to evoke his childhood. The pecan tarts, each nut placed by hand in delicate spirals, had been a labor of love, and now they wanted to box them up like takeout from a diner, to be eaten later alone in their separate lives. My throat tightened, but I forced a smile. "Of course," I murmured, though the word felt like surrender. Marcus checked his phone, his brow furrowing slightly. "Actually, we should probably start thinking about heading out, too. My parents want to stop by my sister's place before it gets too late, and the kids have homework." His sister Jenny was hosting her own Thanksgiving gathering, I learned, a casual affair with coffee and pie. They were leaving my home, my carefully curated feast, to attend her event. The revelation hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. 90 minutes. That's all they'd given me before moving on to the next stop on their holiday itinerary. Barbara, Marcus's mother, chimed in, her tone almost apologetic. "We're doing dessert at Jenny's. Just a small get-together, nothing elaborate like this, of course." Her words meant to soften the blow, only deepen the wound. My elaborate, exhausting, heartfelt effort was just the opening act to Jenny's effortless encore. I swallowed hard, my voice sounding foreign as I replied, "That sounds lovely. Of course, you should go. Family time is important." But inside, I was unraveling. All my work, the sleepless nights, the grocery runs, the endless stirring and chopping, had been for a moment that barely lingered. I dreamed of a day that would knit us closer, a memory we'd all carry forward. Instead, I was a pit stop, a prelude to something simpler, less demanding. The cleanup began almost immediately, a brisk dismantling of the scene I'd so carefully constructed. Dishes were stacked with careless efficiency, serving platters, scraped clean and left on the sideboard. The table, once a masterpiece of abundance, now looked like a battlefield, its beauty reduced to crumbs and water rings. "Don't worry about the dishes, Mom," Sarah said, though she made no move to help. "You've done enough for one day." Her words, meant to comfort, felt like a dismissal. Michael, her husband, added, "Maybe we should pack up some leftovers before we go. No point in leaving Norma with all this food." Leftovers. The word pierced me, a quiet grief settling in my chest. This wasn't just food. It was my heart laid bare, each dish a gesture of devotion. Yet within 2 hours, it had been reduced to something to be divvied up and carted away, like scraps from a buffet. The next 20 minutes were a blur of activity, my family claiming containers and bags, carving the turkey to the bone, portioning out stuffing and sides to stretch their own meals later. "This turkey will make great sandwiches," Derek remarked, his tone cheerful as he loaded slices into a container. "Thanks for doing all the heavy lifting, Norma." Heavy lifting, that's what it was to him, a task I'd shouldered so he wouldn't have to. Emma, Sarah's 16-year-old daughter, was busy snapping selfies with the remnants of the feast, posing with a slice of fikunen and making exaggerated faces for her Instagram followers. "This is so going to get me tons of likes," she told her brother Josh. "Look how aesthetic this all looks." Aesthetic. My aching back, my drained savings, my weeks of planning, it was all just content for a teenager's social media. The word felt like a mockery, reducing my labor to a backdrop for her curated life. As coats were donned and bags gathered, the thank yous came in a hurried wave, polite but perfunctory. "Mom, this was absolutely perfect," Sarah said, her hug brief, scented with her expensive perfume. "Everyone's going to be talking about this meal for years." "Years," she said, as if words could make up for the 90 minutes they'd given me. Marcus shook my hand, his grip firm and businesslike. "We should do this again next year. Maybe make it bigger, invite more people." Bigger, more work, more expense, more of myself poured out for people who'd eat quickly and leave early. One by one, they filed out, their arms laden with containers, their faces satisfied, but already turned toward the next destination. The hugs were fleeting, the promises to call soon automatic. Their gratitude was genuine, but it felt thin, inadequate to the depth of what I'd given. And then they were gone. I stood in the doorway, my apron stained, my body aching from 11 hours of relentless effort, watching their cars disappear down the street. The November air was sharp against my skin, and I shivered, unsure if it was the cold or the hollow feeling spreading through me. Behind me, the house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the steady tick of the grandfather clock. The dining room table was bare, marred by forgotten napkins and water stains. The living room was a mess, crumbs on the carpet, chairs askew, dirty dishes cluttering the card table. Eleanor, my sister, emerged from the kitchen where she'd been quietly washing dishes amid the chaos of their departure. "Well," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "that was something." I closed the door and leaned against it, every one of my 73 years pressing down on me. "It was exactly what I planned," I said, but the words tasted like a lie. "Was it?" I looked at the wreckage of my perfect Thanksgiving. The empty platters, the scattered chairs, the silence that felt heavier than the laughter it had replaced. "They enjoyed themselves," I added, as if saying it could make it enough. "Everyone said the food was wonderful." Eleanor studied me, her gaze piercing in a way that made me want to turn away. "The food was wonderful, but how do you feel?" Her question hung in the air, demanding an honesty I wasn't ready to give. Exhausted, yes. Drained, used up, but there was something else. Something sharper I didn't want to name. Naming it would mean admitting that this dream I'd built had fallen short, not because of them, but because I'd let it define me. I feel fine, I said, the words brittle. A little tired, maybe, but that's normal after a big meal like that. She didn't look convinced. Norma, they were here for less than 2 hours. Quality time is more important than quantity, right? Her tone was gentle, but her words cut deep, stripping away the defenses I'd been clinging to. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you spent a week preparing for 90 minutes of people eating your food and then leaving for a better party. The truth in her words was undeniable, a mirror I didn't want to face. I wanted to argue, to insist that my family had obligations, busy lives, other places to be. But the excuse felt empty, even to me. They have other commitments, I said weakly, my voice barely above a whisper. So do you, Eleanor replied, her voice soft but firm. Or you should. When was the last time someone cooked for you? When was the last time you got to sit down and just enjoy? Her questions lingered, unanswered, as I stood there, surrounded by the remnants of a day that had been everything and nothing like I'd planned. The last time I felt truly alive, truly immersed in joy, was a memory so distant it seemed to belong to someone else's life. After Robert's death, the spark had dimmed, leaving behind a hollow routine of duty and expectation. Even before he passed, I'm not sure I could pinpoint a moment of unburdened happiness. My role had always been clear. I was the one who cooked, who planned, who orchestrated every detail of our family's gatherings. It was my way of weaving love into their lives, through steaming platters of food, meticulously set tables, and a home that radiated warmth, even if it cost me every ounce of my energy. I told myself this was how I showed I cared, how I bound us together. But as I stood in my kitchen, Eleanor's question echoed in my mind like a stone dropped into a still pond. And how do they show they care about you? The silence that followed was deafening. I had no answer, not one that could hold up under scrutiny. My children called now and then, their voices warm but fleeting, like a breeze that passes through but doesn't linger. They remembered my birthday, sent cards for Mother's Day, invited me to family gatherings when it suited their schedules. But when had they last gone out of their way for me? When had they sacrificed even a sliver of their comfort to ease my burden? The question wasn't just a challenge, it was a mirror, forcing me to confront the truth I'd been dodging for years. I looked around my home, the evidence of my relentless efforts strewn across every surface, and felt something fracture inside me. Not my heart, not exactly, but something fragile and foundational, an illusion I'd clung to about my place in this family, about what love was supposed to be. I need to start cleaning up, I said abruptly, my voice tight, because I couldn't bear the weight of Eleanor's pity or the sharp edge of her question. She offered to help, her eyes soft with concern, but I cut her off. No, the word was sharper than I meant, a reflex born of pride and pain. I can handle it. Eleanor hesitated, her lips parting as if to argue, but she only nodded. I'll be next door if you need anything. Anything at all. Her kindness was a lifeline I wasn't ready to grasp, and as she left, the door clicked shut with a finality that echoed through the empty house. Alone in my living room, I surveyed the wreckage of my perfect Thanksgiving. Dirty dishes teetered on every surface, plates smeared with gravy, glasses clouded with fingerprints, serving bowls crusted with food no one had bothered to finish. The carpet bore the stains of spilled wine and crumbs ground into its fibers, and the air carried the heavy, lingering scent of a meal that had been consumed but not savored. I'd spent $350 I didn't have, money that would haunt my budget for months. I'd poured days into planning, cooking, and perfecting every detail, working myself to the edge of collapse. My body ached, my back from hours bent over the stove, my hands raw from scrubbing, my feet swollen from standing too long. And for what? 90 minutes of half-hearted conversation, distracted glances at phones, and perfunctory thanks before everyone rushed off to better plans, leaving me with the aftermath. As I gathered plates, stacking them with a care that felt absurd given how little my efforts had been appreciated, I tried to cling to the fleeting moments that had felt good, the flicker of excitement when everyone arrived, their voices filling the house with life, the compliments on the food, however brief. The moment Marcus raised his glass in a toast, his smile warm as he thanked me, and for a heartbeat, I believe they saw me, valued me. But those moments were like tissue paper, too thin to hold against the weight of everything else. The grueling preparation, the financial strain, the dawning realization that I'd been performing a role, not living in a family. I'd been serving, not sharing, giving, not receiving. Marcus's suggestion as he left, that next year we make it bigger, invite more people, turn it into a real tradition, twisted in my gut like a knife. The thought of repeating this cycle, of exhausting myself year after year to stage a performance for their social media posts and their leftover containers, made me feel physically ill. Was this my future? A lifetime of playing the selfless matriarch, pouring my heart into meals that were photographed more than they were eaten, appreciated more as aesthetics than as acts of love. In the kitchen, I caught my reflection in the window above the sink. The woman staring back was exactly who I felt like. A tired 73-year-old widow, worn thin by decades of putting everyone else first. My face was lined with exhaustion, my eyes dull with something heavier than fatigue. Disappointment, maybe, or the slow burn of betrayal. I'd given everything, my time, my energy, my love, and in return, I'd gotten polite nods and Instagram captions. This wasn't love. This wasn't family. This wasn't what I deserved after a lifetime of sacrifice. The dishes could wait. The mess could wait. For the first time all day, I let myself feel the truth I'd been running from. My family, the people I loved most, saw me as little more than a convenient caterer, a backdrop to their lives, a provider of free meals and picturesque moments. But as I stood in the quiet of my kitchen, surrounded by the debris of my misplaced devotion, I had no inkling that everything was about to change. I didn't know that this moment of clarity was the spark of something far greater, something that would force those who took me for granted to confront what they'd lost. The cleanup stretched until nearly midnight. My ancient dishwasher, unreliable even on its best days, couldn't handle the volume of dishes or the stubborn, baked-on remnants of my labor. Every pot had to be scrubbed by hand, every platter dried and stored, every surface wiped until it gleamed. My hands were red and raw from the scalding water and harsh detergent. My back screamed with every movement, and my feet throbbed so intensely I could barely slip off my shoes. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the silence. The house, so briefly alive with voice and laughter, was now a tomb, as if the day's warmth had been a mirage. I kept hoping for a call, a text, even a simple message to check on me, to acknowledge the effort I'd poured into their happiness. But my phone sat silent on the counter, its blank screen a mirror of the emptiness I felt. The dining room was the last to be tackled, partly because I dreaded facing it, partly because I still held on to a foolish hope that someone might reach out. The room told a story of neglect. Napkins crumpled and tossed on the floor, a smear of gravy on my good tablecloth that no one had bothered to mention, footprints in the carpet where one of the children had dragged mud through the house. But it was the food that broke me. So much of it wasted, serving spoons abandoned in dishes barely touched, rolls broken apart and left to harden, the vegetarian stuffing I'd spent hours crafting for Derek's girlfriend reduced to a single bite, congealing on a plate. As I scraped plate after plate into the trash, I tallied the cost, not just the freight in groceries, but the 47 hours of preparation, the decades of believing this was what love looked like. All of it, wasted. Then I found Sarah's phone left behind in her haste to get to Jenny's more important gathering. The screen lit up as I picked it up, a cascade of notifications from apps I didn't recognize. I knew I shouldn't look, but something compelled me to swipe, to see what had been more captivating than the meal I'd poured my soul into. Her Instagram account opened, and what I saw froze me. Photo after photo of my Thanksgiving, my table, my food, my home, presented in carefully curated shots, lit and angled like a professional photo shoot. The captions were a gut punch. Thanksgiving goals. My sweet mom went all out this year. 20 plus dishes of pure comfort food, heaven. Feeling so blessed to have a mom who loves us enough to spend days in the kitchen making magic happen. Family traditions never go out of style. Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments praising her luck, her family, her dedicated mother. I scrolled further, each post a fresh wound. Close-ups of dishes I'd labored over, shots of Sarah posing with me, moments I barely remembered because I'd been so consumed with serving. The spread is insane. Mom's been cooking since 3 a.m., and every single dish is perfection. This is what love looks like, people. She'd turned my exhaustion into a prop, my love into content, my life into a backdrop for her online persona. The realization wasn't just painful, it was a reckoning. As I stood there, surrounded by the remnants of a day I'd given everything to create, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change, and it had to start with me. The glow of my phone screen felt like a spotlight exposing a truth I wasn't ready to face. Sarah's posts about our Thanksgiving painted a picture of a warm, lavish family gathering, brimming with authenticity and joy. She described the spread with such vivid detail: the golden turkey, the vibrant cranberry sauce, the steaming casseroles, each dish a testament to a perfect holiday. Her words danced with gratitude, as if she'd been enveloped in a family tradition that was nothing short of magical. But it was her final post that hit me like a freight train. A meticulously arranged photo of leftovers, neatly packed into containers with her elegant handwritten labels, accompanied by a caption that gushed, "The best part of Mom's epic Thanksgiving? Leftovers for days. Already dreaming of turkey sandwiches and cozy casserole nights all week long. Who says you can't have Thanksgiving twice?" The comments poured in like a tidal wave, a chorus of strangers and friends alike marveling at her idyllic family life, praising her for having such a remarkable mother, begging for recipes, and confessing their envy over the abundance. Not a single comment acknowledged that I was the one who had slaved over every dish. Not one person noted that the epic Thanksgiving Sarah so proudly displayed was the result of my labor, my money, my sleepless nights. In her carefully curated online world, Sarah was the cherished daughter basking in familial warmth, not the one who had treated me like hired help, reaping the benefits of my exhaustion without lifting a finger. My hands trembled as I set the phone down, the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest. I sank into a dining room chair, one I hadn't even had the chance to sit in during the chaos of the dinner itself, and felt the air grow heavy. It was as if I were drowning in slow motion, the realization of what had happened sinking in with cruel clarity. This wasn't about family or tradition or love. This was about Sarah's need to craft an enviable online persona, to showcase a life of abundance and connection that wasn't entirely real. I had been a prop in her performance, a tool to create content that fed her social media narrative. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving replayed in my mind like a bitter montage. Sarah's endless phone calls, each one layered with specific requests: gluten-free options for her friend, vegan sides for her cousin, extra chairs for last-minute guests. I'd spent hours adjusting menu, scouring stores for specialty ingredients, and rearranging my small dining room to accommodate everyone. At the time, I'd convinced myself it was about love, about creating a moment for us to come together as a family. But now, sitting in the quiet aftermath, I saw it differently. Every click of her phone's camera during dinner, every carefully staged photo of plates before anyone took a bite, every rushed moment of the meal itself, it all pointed to one truth. The food, the gathering, the effort, it was all for show. They hadn't come to share a meal with me. They'd come to harvest content from my labor. The dining room felt like a ghost town now. The carpet still bore the faint imprints of the extra tables I'd set up, and water stains marred my good furniture where careless guests had ignored the coasters. I thought of the Thanksgivings when Robert was still alive, when the kids were little, when this room hummed with genuine laughter and connection. Back then, people came because they wanted to be together, not because they needed something to post online. When had it changed? When had I become so desperate for their attention that I'd settled for this hollow version of love? My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my reverie. For a fleeting moment, my heart lifted, hoping someone was checking on me, maybe even thanking me. But it was just Marcus, Sarah's husband, asking if she'd left her phone at my house. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Should I respond right away as I always did, ever the accommodating mother? Or should I wait, reclaim a sliver of control? In the end, I typed a curt, "Yes, she can pick it up tomorrow," and flipped the phone face down, the word tomorrow echoing in my mind. Tomorrow. They'd expect me to be available tomorrow too, ready to hand over Sarah's phone at their convenience, just as they'd expected me to be available for their Thanksgiving performance. It was always the same. Me, endlessly available, endlessly giving, grateful for whatever crumbs of attention they tossed my way. That night, I went to bed with an ache in every muscle, my mind spinning like a hamster wheel. I replayed the dinner, searching for moments of genuine appreciation I might have missed. Had anyone truly thanked me? Had anyone noticed the care I'd poured into every detail? But the more I thought, the more certain I became that I'd been used. Marcus had brought expensive wine but never opened it, letting it sit like a prop for his own image. The special dietary dishes I'd painstakingly prepared went largely untouched, their recipients nibbling politely before moving on. Ruth, Sarah's friend, had shown up late, eaten a few bites, and left within an hour, her place setting a silent testament to my wasted effort. It was all about appearances, thoughtfulness, abundance, connection, none of it real. Morning came, and I woke feeling like I'd been run over. My hands were raw from hours of scrubbing dishes, my head throbbed with exhaustion that sleep couldn't touch. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional weight that had settled over me like a fog. This was my life now, giving everything and receiving polite nods, social media likes, and the privilege of being included in gatherings where I did all the work. When the phone rang at 9 a.m., I didn't need to check the caller ID to know it was Sarah. Her voice was bright, oblivious. "Hi, Mom. I hope I didn't wake you. Did you sleep well after all that excitement yesterday?" Excitement. She called it excitement, as if I'd been hosting a party instead of running myself ragged. I mumbled that I'd slept fine, and she barreled on, "Great, I think I left my phone at your house. I've been going crazy without it. Can I swing by around noon to grab it?" Oh, and Mom, I just have to say again how incredible yesterday was. Everyone's still talking about it. Marcus's mom called this morning to rave about your cooking, and my Instagram post already has over 3,000 likes. People are so impressed by what you pulled off. 3,000 likes, my heart sank further. She wasn't proud of me. She was proud of the attention my work had earned her. I managed a weak, "That's nice, dear," but she caught the edge in my voice. "Are you okay, Mom? You sound a little off." Off. I was off because I'd finally seen my place in this family for what it was. The invisible laborer, the backdrop to their curated lives. "Just tired," I said. It was a long day. She laughed, breezy and unconcerned. Of course it was, but so worth it, right? Days like yesterday are what make all the effort worthwhile. Creating memories, bringing family together, continuing as traditions. It's priceless. Priceless. Except it had cost me $350, 2 weeks of planning, and the last of my illusions about my relationship with my children. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet kitchen, the faint smell of sage and turkey still lingering in the air. Anger simmered inside me, but there was something else too. A strange sense of relief, like a weight I'd carried for years had finally begun to lift. I'd spent so long performing, proving my worth through endless acts of service, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to simply exist. I'd been so focused on being needed that I hadn't noticed I wasn't truly valued. The distinction hit me like a revelation. Being needed meant people expected things from me. Meals, accommodations, availability. Being valued meant they appreciated me for who I was, not just what I could provide. For the first time in years, I asked myself what I wanted. Not what Sarah needed, not what Marcus expected, not what the family demanded, but what I wanted. The answers were startlingly simple. I wanted relationships where giving and receiving were balanced, where my time and energy were treated as precious, not infinite. I wanted to matter to people even when I wasn't cooking their meals or hosting their gatherings. Above all, I wanted to stop being taken for granted. As I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of yesterday's feast, Something stirred inside me. A quiet power, not the kind that comes from serving others, but the kind that comes from choosing how I deserve to be treated. I thought of Eleanor's questions from the night before, her gentle probing. When was the last time someone cooked for me? When had anyone gone out of their way to make my life easier, instead of expecting me to do it for them? The answers were sobering, but they were also a wake-up call. If I wanted to be treated differently, I'd have to set new boundaries, even if it meant discomfort for me and everyone else. I picked up Sarah's phone from the dining room table, its screen still glowing with notifications from her post. As I scrolled through the comments, the likes, the carefully crafted illusion of our perfect Thanksgiving, I felt a resolve hardening within me. This wasn't about resentment, it was about reclaiming my worth. The next time Sarah came by, I wouldn't just hand over her phone and smile. I'd start teaching her and everyone else how to treat me, not as a prop, but as a person. As I scrolled through Sarah's Instagram feed one last time, a familiar ache settled deep in my chest. Each photo showcased my meticulously prepared dishes, my carefully set table, my life's work, yet the captions and comments painted her as the grateful daughter of a miraculous mother. Strangers showered her with praise for being blessed with a parent who could create such perfection, while my labor, my exhaustion, my sacrifices remained invisible, buried beneath her curated narrative. The sting of it wasn't new, but tonight it cut deeper. I lingered on the posts, my fingers trembling over the screen, when something caught my eye, a detail I'd overlooked the night before. The timestamp on her first post revealed she'd uploaded it while still seated at my table. While I was darting between the kitchen and dining room, refilling plates, clearing dishes, and ensuring everyone's needs were met, Sarah had been crafting captions, tweaking filters, and building her online persona on the foundation of my weary hands and aching back. In that moment, a quiet resolve took root. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I opened my laptop, my heart pounding with a mix of defiance and uncertainty. Social media had never interested me before. The apps my children were always glued to, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, felt like foreign territory, a world of noise and vanity I'd happily avoided. But now I saw their power with startling clarity. These platforms weren't just for sharing pretty pictures. They were battlegrounds for shaping stories, for deciding whose version of reality would dominate. For too long, I'd let others, Sarah, her friends, even strangers, tell my story, reducing me to a faceless provider of feasts and comfort. That ended now. I was done being a silent backdrop to someone else's spotlight. It was time to claim my voice and tell the world who I was, what I'd endured, and what I was worth. That morning, I threw myself into learning the mechanics of Instagram. I fumbled through tutorials on filters, hashtags, and posting, each click a small act of rebellion against the years I'd spent in the shadows. But the technical details were secondary. What mattered was the story I wanted to weave, a narrative that honored my humanity, my struggles, and my unacknowledged worth. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the ghosts of last night's chaos, and let my thoughts spill onto the page. What did I want the world to know about the woman behind the perfect Thanksgiving spread? How could I capture the weight of my love, the cost of my generosity, and the quiet resentment that had been simmering for years? By the time Sarah breezed through my front door at noon to retrieve her phone, I felt ready, not just to face her, but to face the world. Sarah entered with her usual confidence, as if the house and everything in it belonged to her. She chattered about her morning, her voice bright with excitement over the flood of comments on her posts. "Mom, you're famous," she said, laughing as she scrolled through her notifications, oblivious to the irony. "I've never gotten this much engagement before. People are so impressed by what you pulled off yesterday." What I pulled off, the words landed like a slap, as if the feast had been a parlor trick, conjured with a wave of my hand, rather than 3 days of planning, 11 hours of cooking, and $350 drained from my fixed income. I handed her phone back without a word, watching as her attention slid effortlessly from me to her screen, just as it had shifted from my table to her friend Jenny's dessert party the night before. "Oh, this is funny," she said, eyes fixed on her phone. Someone asked if you do catering. I told them you were just naturally gifted at this stuff, that it comes easily to you. Isn't that sweet? Easily. The word echoed in my mind, a mockery of the bone-deep fatigue I'd carried for days. 3 days of preparation, countless hours in the kitchen, every penny stretched to its limit, and it came easily. I felt a surge of anger, but beneath it, something heavier. Grief for the years I'd let her diminish my efforts, for the part of me that had accepted her narrative as truth. "Mom, did you hear me?" she asked, finally glancing up, perhaps sensing the shift in the air. "I heard you," I said, my voice steady but laced with something she couldn't quite place. "Are you sure you're okay? You seem quiet today." "I'm fine, Sarah," I replied, meeting her gaze. "Just thinking." She tilted her head, waiting for me to elaborate, but I held my silence. "Thinking about what?" she pressed, a flicker of unease crossing her face. At 45, Sarah was a successful professional, a woman who commanded boardrooms and built a thriving online presence. Yet she still looked to me to soothe her discomfort, to manage her emotions as I'd done since she was a child. It struck me then how little she understood me, not as her mother, but as a person with her own needs, her own limits, her own breaking point. "About next year," I said simply. "Next year?" Her face lit up, misinterpreting my words. "Oh, you mean Thanksgiving?" Marcus was serious about making it even bigger, you know. He's thinking we could invite some friends, maybe turn it into a real community gathering. Wouldn't that be amazing? Amazing. The word felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. More guests to feed, more expenses to shoulder, more work to pour into a fleeting moment that would be harvested for someone else's social media clout. "I'm sure it would be quite something," Odd, my tone carefully neutral. Sarah beamed, mistaking my restraint for enthusiasm. "I knew you'd love the idea. You're so good at this stuff, Mom. It's like you were born to create these special experiences for people." Born to create experiences. Born to serve. Born to give until there was nothing left. The words reverberated in my mind, each one a reminder of the role I'd been cast in, not just by Sarah, but by a lifetime of expectations. I'd spent decades believing that love meant sacrifice, that my worth lay in what I could provide. But now, staring at my daughter's oblivious smile, I felt something shift. "Well," I said, choosing my words with care, "we'll see what next year brings." After Sarah left, I returned to my laptop, my resolve hardening with every keystroke. I wasn't just creating a social media account. I was crafting a new chapter of my life, one where my story would be told on my terms. But I knew I wouldn't tell it alone. Once the world saw the truth behind those glossy Instagram posts, once they understood the cost of what came easily, the conversation around my Thanksgiving feast and my life would change forever. It took me 3 days to craft my first post, 3 days of writing and rewriting, of wrestling with the fear of exposing my truth, of finding the courage to reclaim my narrative. I'd never realized how much power lay in telling your own story until I sat down to do it. The photo I chose was one Sarah had snapped but never shared, a candid shot of me in the kitchen at 6 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning. My hair was a mess, my face etched with exhaustion, my hands busy stirring gravy while checking the oven. Behind me, the kitchen was a battlefield. Dirty dishes piled high, ingredient containers strewn across every surface, the raw evidence of hours of relentless work. It wasn't polished or pretty. It wasn't Instagram-worthy. It was real. I created my account under the name Our Real Grandma Norma and poured my heart into the caption, each word a deliberate step toward freedom. "This is what effortless family cooking really looks like," I wrote. This photo was taken at 6 a.m. on Thanksgiving, hour 3 of an 11-hour cooking marathon. By the end of the day, I'd prepared 20 dishes for 28 people, spent $350 from my fixed income, and worked myself to the point of collapse. The blessed family gathering lasted 90 minutes before everyone left for a more exciting party elsewhere. But don't worry, my daughter got over 3,000 likes on Instagram for showcasing my natural gift for creating magical family moments. Some gifts come at a higher cost than others. I added hashtags I'd researched with care, had elder abuse, hash family exploitation, hash truth-telling, hash unpaid labor, hash real talk, hash grandma story, behind the scenes, hash toxic family, setting boundaries, hash enough is enough. Then, with a deep breath, I hit publish and waited. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, my post had been shared dozens of times. By midday, hundreds. By nightfall, thousands of people were commenting, sharing their own stories of family exploitation, expressing outrage at my situation, and demanding accountability. The real turning point came when someone juxtaposed Sarah's original post with mine, creating a split-screen comparison that laid bare the chasm between her polished fantasy and my raw reality. On one side, her vibrant table, brimming with abundance and gratitude. On the other, my weary face at dawn, surrounded by the chaos of my labor. Her captions about being blessed stood in stark contrast to my accounting of what that blessing cost. Time, money, energy, and dignity. The internet can be a harsh place, but it can also amplify truth in ways I'd never imagined. The comments on my post were a tapestry of support, anger, and recognition. Women my age shared stories of adult children who demanded endless service without gratitude. Younger people expressed horror at the possibility that their own families might be taking their elders for granted. Everyone seemed to grasp that this wasn't just about one dinner. It was about a culture that treated some family members as invisible laborers rather than cherished equals. But it was the private messages that broke me open. Hundreds of people reached out, their words a lifeline across the miles. A 70-year-old woman in Texas wrote about cooking Christmas dinner for 40 people every year while her wealthy children dined at upscale restaurants. A grandmother in Ohio shared how her daughter-in-law expected free childcare 3 days a week, but excluded her from family celebrations. An elderly man confessed that his children only called when they needed money, too busy to visit otherwise. Their stories echoed mine, a chorus of voices that had been silenced for too long. I wasn't alone. I'd never been alone. On the second day, as my post continued to spread, Sarah called. I stared at her name on my phone, my heart a tangle of love and resolve, and let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear her voice, not yet. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself, my truth, my story, and I knew deep in my bones that nothing would ever be the same. As I stood by my kitchen window, gazing out at Eleanor's house across the street, a pang of envy stirred in my chest. Every window glowed with warm, golden light, spilling out the kind of coziness that comes from a family gathered together, sharing quiet dinners filled with laughter and ease. Their evenings didn't demand anyone collapse under the weight of endless tasks, unlike mine. My phone buzzed again, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Sarah's voicemail. I pressed play, her voice trembling through the speaker, laced with distress. Mom, I don't get it. People are saying awful things about me online. Why? I can't understand why. Someone sent me a link to an Instagram account with posting pictures from our Thanksgiving, twisting it to make it seem like they did something terrible. We did something wrong. It's nonsense. We had such a perfect day and we were so thankful for everything you did. Please call me back. I'm really upset. Her words stung, sharp and shallow. She was upset, not for me, not for the way she'd been treated, but because her carefully curated online persona was cracking under the weight of an unflattering truth. My heart sank heavy with disappointment. I didn't call her back. I couldn't. The ache of being unseen, of pouring myself into a day meant to bring us together only to be left with scraps of their gratitude, was too raw. By the third day, the story had spiraled far beyond social media. A local news station caught wind of it, then a regional paper, and soon a national website that thrived on viral scandals plastered it across their homepage. My phone became a relentless chorus of notifications, reporters begging for interviews, eager to dig into the Thanksgiving exploitation story that was, as they put it, breaking it into the internet. Each call felt like an invasion, a demand for me to perform my pain for their headlines. I declined them all. This wasn't about chasing fame or basking in fleeting attention. It was about reclaiming my truth and, more crucially, drawing boundaries I should have set years ago when the weight of expectation first started to crush me. But one request stood out. Podcast focused on elder rights and family dynamics reached out. Hosted by a social worker named Maria Santos. Her email was different, thoughtful, probing, showing she grasped the deeper currents beneath the surface of my story. I agreed to speak with her. During our recorded conversation, Maria's voice was warm but incisive. Norma, your story has clearly resonated with so many people. What do you think it reveals about how we treat our elders and navigate family relationships? I'd had days to mull this over, to step back from the personal hurt and see the broader tapestry it wove. I think we've built a culture that expects certain people, often women, especially older women, to give endlessly without ever asking for anything in return. We're taught to feel grateful just for being included, for being needed, for the chance to serve others. But gratitude without mutual care isn't love, it's exploitation. It's a quiet theft of someone's time, energy, and dignity. Maria pressed further. Some online critics argue that cooking for family is a normal act of love, that you're exaggerating what sounds like a typical holiday gathering. How would you respond to that? I took a breath, steadying myself. They're missing the heart of it. Cooking for family can absolutely be love when it's reciprocal, when the effort is seen, appreciated, and returned in meaningful ways, when the person cooking is cared for, not just consumed. But when one person bears the entire burden, pays every cost, exhausts themselves, and is left alone to clean up while others walk away without a second thought, that's not love. That's labor dressed up as obligation, and it's unsustainable. And what do you hope people take away from your experience? Maria asked. I thought of the flood of messages from strangers who'd reached out, their stories echoing mine, people who felt invisible in their own families, valued only for what they could provide. I want them to know they deserve to be seen for who they are, not just what they do. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for any relationship to thrive. And I want people to look hard at their own families and ask, are we truly sharing a love, or is someone being quietly taken for granted? The podcast episode exploded, downloaded over 1 million times in its first week. My story had struck a raw nerve, tapping into a collective unease about how we treat those who love us most, how we lean on their sacrifices without pausing to consider the cost. But the real shift came when Sarah showed up at my doorstep, unannounced, her face flushed with a mix of anger and humiliation. "Mom, you have to stop this," she blurted, before I'd even opened the door fully. "Do you have any idea what you've done? People at work are whispering about it. Emma's friends are sharing those awful posts. Marcus's mother won't even look at me. She thinks I'm some kind of monster who mistreats her elderly mom." Her words landed like a slap, her focus still locked on her own wounded pride rather than the pain I'd carried. I stepped aside, my voice calm but firm. "Hello, Sarah, come in." "Don't hello, Sarah me like everything's fine," she snapped, storming past me. "You've humiliated me in front of the entire internet. People are calling me ungrateful, selfish, terrible. There are memes, Mom, memes mocking me." I led her to the living room and sank into my favorite chair, the one where Robert used to sit, reading his newspaper every evening, a quiet ritual that grounded us both. The memory of him steadied me now. "I'm sorry you're facing consequences for your choices," I said evenly, "but I'm not sorry for speaking my truth." "Your truth?" Sarah's voice cracked with disbelief. "We had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Everyone loved the food. Everyone was grateful. We all had an amazing time. I don't understand why you're acting like we tortured you." "Did you have an amazing time, Sarah?" I asked, holding her gaze. "Of course I did," she replied, almost indignant. "It was exactly what I wanted. A classic family gathering, incredible food, everyone together." "And after you got what you wanted," I pressed, my voice quiet but unyielding, "what happened next?" She blinked, thrown by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, after you snapped your photos, posted your perfect moments online, and packed your leftovers, what happened to the person who made it all possible?" Her mouth opened, then closed, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. You cleaned up, like always." "Alone," I said, the word heavy with years of unspoken resentment. "After 11 hours of cooking, after spending money I didn't have, after pouring every ounce of myself into giving you a holiday you wanted. Not one of you offered to help, or stayed to talk to, or thought I might be tired, or need a moment to breathe. Sarah shifted in her seat, discomfort etching lines across her forehead. We offered to help with cleanup, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. You said you had it under control. When? I challenged gently, not out of cruelty but necessity. When exactly did anyone offer? She faltered, her certainty crumbling. I pressed on deeper, not to hurt but to reveal. And even if someone had offered to help with dishes, why was that the only thing anyone thought to do? Why didn't anyone offer to bring a dish to share, or chips in for groceries, or show up early to prep? Why was the bare minimum offered only to ease your own guilt, the extent of your care? Sarah's eyes dropped to her hands, twisting nervously in her lap. We thought you loved doing it. You never complained. You always seemed happy to cook for us. I loved it, I admitted, my voice softening with the weight of memory. I was happy when it felt like we were together, when it was about connection, not just consumption. But that day wasn't about being with me, was it? It was about getting what you needed, your photos, your content, your perfect holiday, before moving on to something else. The silence between us stretched, heavy with truths we'd both avoided for too long. I could see her grappling with my words, perhaps for the first time truly seeing the imbalance that had grown between us. Those Instagram posts, I said quietly, they showed me what my work meant to you. You turned my effort into a prop for your story, my exhaustion into proof of your blessed life. You got thousands of likes for something you never paused to value. Sarah's tears welled now, and for a moment I saw the little girl she'd been, running to me when the world felt too big, trusting me to fix it. The instinct to comfort her surged, but I held firm, letting her sit with the weight of her actions. I didn't mean for it to feel like that, she whispered, her voice breaking. I thought you liked being needed. I thought it made you feel important. Being needed isn't the same as being loved, I said, my words steady but kind. Being useful isn't the same as being cherished. And serving as a prop for someone's social media isn't the same as sharing a life together. She was crying openly now, raw and unguarded, and I felt the ache of loving her despite the hurt. But she wasn't a child anymore. The pain she felt was the consequence of choices she'd made, and I couldn't shield her from that. What do you want me to do? She asked, her voice small. How do I fix this? It was the first real question she'd asked. Not about saving face or silencing the internet, but about mending what was broken. I leaned forward, my heart heavy but hopeful. I want you to see me, Sarah. Not as your personal chef or a prop for your posts, but as your mother, someone who deserves care, respect, and reciprocity. The words spilled out with a rawness that had been simmering for years, each syllable heavy with the weight of the unspoken truths. I'm not your content creator. I'm not your unpaid staff. I'm your mother, and I deserve to be treated with the same respect and consideration you'd offer anyone else you claim to love. My voice trembled, not from fear but from the exhaustion of carrying this truth silently for so long. Sarah, my daughter, stood frozen, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and guilt. I could see her grappling with the realization that we'd reached a breaking point. Of course you do, she whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with a sincerity that felt genuine but fragile. I never meant to hurt you. I shook my head, the ache in my chest tightening. What you meant doesn't matter as much as what you did. You took advantage of someone who loves you unconditionally, someone who would move mountains for you, someone who has spent her entire adult life putting your needs before her own. My words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. Sarah's hand brushed across her eyes, wiping away tears that glistened in the soft light of the living room. I could feel her confusion, her struggle to understand how we'd arrived at this moment, how the years of unspoken expectations had built a wall between us. Her silence was deafening, but her tears spoke volumes. She was wrestling with the weight of her own actions. So, what happens now? She asked, her voice cracking, her eyes searching mine for a path forward. How do we move from here? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. That depends on you, Sarah. It depends on whether you're willing to see me as a person with my own needs, my own limits, and not just a resource to be tapped whenever it's convenient for you. It depends on whether you're willing to change how you treat me. My words were firm but not unkind. I wanted her to understand, not just to feel guilty. I wanted her to see me, truly see me, for the first time in years. Her response came slowly, haltingly. I want to change. I want to do better. I don't know how. There was a vulnerability in her admission that stirred something in me, a flicker of hope, delicate but real. For the first time since she'd walked through my door, I felt a spark of possibility. Admitting she didn't know how was a start. It was the first step toward learning, toward real, meaningful change. You begin by asking yourself what you're bringing to our relationship, not just what you're taking from it, I said, my voice softening but still resolute. You start by considering my needs, my preferences, my limitations before you make plans that involve me. You start by treating my time and energy as valuable, not infinite. I paused, letting the words settle. Take Thanksgiving next year, for example. Marcus was so excited about making it bigger, grander, but I'm not your event planner. If you want a big family gathering, you'll need to figure out how to make it happen without expecting me to carry the entire burden. Sarah's eyes dropped to the floor, and I could see the weight of my words sinking in. For years, she'd leaned on my labor, my sacrifices, without pausing to consider the toll it took. I'd cooked, cleaned, hosted, and organized, pouring my heart into creating moments for our family, while she and her brother reaped the benefits without a second thought. The realization seemed to hit her like a wave, and I watched as she wrestled with the guilt of her own thoughtlessness. Next year, I continued, if you want a big Thanksgiving, you'll need to take responsibility. Host it at your house. Ask everyone to bring a dish or chip in for expenses. Hire caterers if you need to. But it won't be my job to exhaust myself for your vision of a perfect holiday. My voice was steady, but inside I was trembling. Setting these boundaries felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd lost long ago. The conversation stretched on for another hour, raw and uncomfortable, but necessary. Sarah asked questions, her voice tentative, as if she were navigating unfamiliar terrain. I explained the boundaries I should have set years ago, the ones I'd let erode under the weight of love and obligation. It wasn't easy for either of us. For Sarah, it meant confronting the reality that she'd been selfish, that her actions had been thoughtless in ways she hadn't fully grasped. For me, it meant holding firm in the face of her tears, her confusion, and her genuine desire to make things right. I felt the pull to soften, to reassure her, to slip back into the role of the selfless mother who smoothed everything over. But I resisted. This was too important. This was about reclaiming my worth. When Sarah finally left, I stood in the quiet of my home, feeling lighter than I had in decades. Not because I'd hurt her or reveled in her distress, but because I'd finally spoken the truths that had been buried for too long. I'd stood up for myself in a way I hadn't dared to do before. The weight of years of unspoken resentment lifted, replaced by a quiet strength I hadn't known I still possessed. In the weeks that followed, ripples from our conversation spread through the family. My son Michael was initially furious, accusing me of airing our dirty laundry for the world to see. His anger stung, but I stood my ground. Over several long, difficult conversations, he began to see the truth. The laundry had been dirty for years, and pretending otherwise hadn't made it clean. Other family members reached out, some supportive, some defensive, some bewildered by why I was making such a fuss over what they saw as normal family dynamics. Their reactions varied, but each one forced me to hold fast to my newfound resolve. The most unexpected responses came from strangers. My story, shared publicly, struck a chord far beyond my own family. I received hundreds of messages from people who thanked me for giving them the courage to set their own boundaries, to value their own time and energy, to demand reciprocity in their relationships. A woman in Arizona wrote to say she'd stopped hosting weekly family dinners until her adult children agreed to share the cooking and cleaning. A grandfather in Maine shared that he'd started charging his daughter for babysitting after years of providing free childcare while she splurged on luxury vacations. A widow in Florida told me she'd sold her large home and moved to a retirement community where she could build friendships based on mutual respect, not obligation. Their stories mirrored my own, and in their words, I found a sense of solidarity, a reminder that I wasn't alone. 3 months later, Sarah called with an update. She was planning Thanksgiving for the following year, and this time she was doing it differently. She'd decided to host it at her house, with each family member contributing specific dishes and sharing expenses. She'd even hired a cleaning service to handle the aftermath, ensuring no one person, especially me, would be left exhausted. "I want to do this right," she said, her voice filled with determination. "I want it to be about spending time together, not about creating content or getting something from each other. I want it to be about connection." Her words warmed my heart, not because they erased the past, but because they showed she was listening, learning, trying. "That sounds wonderful," I replied, and I meant it. "Will you come?" she asked, her voice tinged with both hope and uncertainty. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm hoping you'll give me a chance to show you I'm learning." I paused, weighing not just what I wanted, but what would be healthiest for both of us. "I'll come," I said finally, "on one condition: no phones at the table, no social media posts during the meal. If you want to take a few pictures afterward for memories, that's fine. But the focus should be on being present with each other, not on documenting it for the world." "Deal," she said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. As I hung up, I looked around my quiet house and felt a deep, unfamiliar contentment. Not the fleeting satisfaction of meeting others' expectations, but the profound peace of being valued for who I was, not what I could do. That evening, my friend Eleanor knocked on my door, a bottle of champagne in hand and a grin that hinted at mischief. "We're toasting your newfound fame," she declared, letting herself in. "You've single-handedly started a revolution in family dynamics." I laughed, shaking my head. "I didn't start a revolution. I just told the truth about one dinner." "One dinner that represented decades of being taken for granted," she countered, pouring the champagne. "One dinner that showed the world how we treat the people who love us most. The difference between appreciation and exploitation." We sat in my living room, sipping champagne and reflecting on how strange it felt to be recognized for speaking up, for setting boundaries instead of endlessly accommodating. "Do you ever regret it?" Eleanor asked, her tone serious. "Going public, I mean. Making it all so visible." I thought about it, really thought about it. There had been hard moments, family members who didn't understand, criticism from those who thought I was overreacting, the surreal experience of strangers knowing intimate details of my life. But there had also been gifts, the messages from people who felt less alone, the knowledge that my story had helped others, the relief of living authentically. Most importantly, there was the slow, steady change in my relationships with my children. Sarah was trying, and Michael was too. He'd started calling just to talk, inviting me to dinner for no reason other than to spend time together. "No," I said finally, "I don't regret it. For the first time in my adult life, I feel seen for who I am, not who people need me to be. That's worth any discomfort." Eleanor raised her glass. "To Norma Jackson, who reminded the world that grandmothers are people too. To learning the difference between love and performance," I added, clinking my glass against hers. We drank to new beginnings, to the power of truth, and to the radical idea that everyone deserves to be valued for who they are, not what they can provide. 6 months later, an email from a publishing company landed in my inbox. They'd followed the conversation my story had sparked and wanted to know if I'd be interested in writing a book about my experience, a deeper exploration of family dynamics, elder care, and the importance of reciprocity. I said yes, not for fame or money, but because I'd learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is tell your truth and let it ripple outward, changing not just your life, but the lives of others. The weight of decades pressed against her chest as she stood at the sink, hands raw from scrubbing dishes late into the night. That Thanksgiving dinner had been a breaking point, not because of the endless platters of turkey or the case of family chatter, but because she realized with a clarity that felt both freeing and terrifying that she deserved more than this. Love, she understood now, should lift her spirit, not drain it dry. Being valued meant being seen as a whole person, her dreams, her aches, her quiet hopes, not just a pair of hands to serve and clean. That moment of awakening wasn't the end of her story, but its beginning. a spark that would grow into something far bigger than her small Ohio kitchen could contain. Writing her truth felt like peeling back layers of her own skin. At 74, sitting at her laptop on a chilly November morning, her fingers still stiff from the previous night's labor, she poured her heart into words she never thought she'd share. She didn't expect those words to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond her own. 8 months later, a book deal landed in her inbox, her story having gone viral in ways she could scarcely comprehend. For a year, she traveled the country, listening to others who reached out, their voices echoing her own pain and resilience. Each conversation revealed a truth both devastating and uplifting. Her experience was not hers alone, but part of a larger tapestry of sacrifice and silent expectation. Margaret from Portland shared a story that broke her heart. For 30 years, Margaret had hosted Christmas Eve dinners for 43 relatives, including her ex-husband's new family, despite the agony of rheumatoid arthritis and the strain of living on disability. She'd never missed a year, never asked for help, her pride and duty keeping her silent. Reading the story had been a mirror for Margaret, reflecting back the cost of her selflessness. For the first time, she felt permission to say no, to reclaim her energy for herself. The relief in her voice was palpable, tinged with the grief of years spent unseen. James from Alabama carried a different burden. A father who prided himself on providing, he'd mowed lawns, fixed leaky roofs, and paid bills for his 3 adult children while they jetted off on lavish vacations and drove cars they couldn't afford. He'd thought love meant giving without question, until the story showed him the line between support and enabling. His voice cracked as he described the moment he stopped writing checks, the guilt warring with a newfound sense of self-respect. He was learning to love his children by teaching them to stand on their own. Carmen from Texas had raised her grandchildren for 12 years, her home a sanctuary while their parents chased careers and nightlife. No child support, no regular thanks, just the expectation that she'd keep giving. She'd believed it was her role as a grandmother, a duty carved into her bones. But the story stirred something in her, a realization that love should flow both ways. As she spoke, her words carried a quiet strength, a resolve to ask for the respect she'd always deserved. These stories, and countless others, painted a picture of a society where certain people, often women, often elders, were expected to give endlessly, their worth measured by their service. Yet alongside the pain were glimmers of change. People inspired by her words were rewriting their own lives, setting boundaries they'd never dared to imagine. A grandmother in Michigan began charging her daughter-in-law for babysitting, using the money to take her first vacation in 15 years, her face glowing with pride as she described the ocean's edge. An elderly father in Nevada sold his sprawling family home, trading holiday hosting for the peace of a retirement community, free from his children's complaints about his cooking. A widow in South Carolina stopped washing her 42-year-old son's clothes, watching him fumble through laundry with a mix of amusement and relief. Each act was a declaration. Respect in families isn't a given. It must be earned, modeled, sometimes fought for. The media whirlwind caught her off guard. 3 national TV shows, countless newspaper interviews, speaking engagements at conferences on elder rights. She became a voice for those who'd felt invisible. Every platform let her hammer home the same truth. Love without mutual care is a one-way street, unsustainable and unfair. Family ties, like any relationship, thrive on respect and reciprocity, but the most unexpected response came from younger voices. College students who saw their own entitlement in her story, young professionals who realized they'd treated their grandparents as free labor rather than cherished elders. A 25-year-old named Jessica wrote a letter that brought tears to her eyes. Jessica confessed to treating her mother like an on-call assistant, always asking for advice, money, or help, but never checking on her father's own struggles. "Your story showed me that moms are people too," she wrote, her words raw with regret and resolve. "They have their own needs, their own dreams, and I want to love mine better." Jessica's letter was a beacon of hope, proof that the next generation could break the cycle before it took root. Her own family's transformation was slower, messier, but no less profound. Her daughter Sarah didn't change overnight. It took months of hard conversations, tears, and stubborn boundary setting. There were moments when old habits crept back, when frustration threatened to derail their progress. But they kept at it, learning to see each other as equals, not as giver and taker. Now when Sarah calls, it's to share a laugh or a story, not to list demands. Their time together feels like a gift, not a performance. Sarah's gratitude shows in her actions, small gestures like bringing coffee just the way she likes it, or insisting she rest while others handle chores. The shift feels like a miracle, hard-won and deeply real. The second Thanksgiving, the first after her story went viral, was a revelation. Sarah took charge, hosting with a plan that shared the load. She sent a group message outlining rules. No phones at dinner, no social media without consent, no ducking out early unless it was truly urgent. Walking into Sarah's house that morning, she found a kitchen alive with a collaboration. Michael, her grandson, was kneading dough for his great-grandmother's cornbread, his focus a quiet tribute to family tradition. Lisa was chopping vegetables with the teenagers, her laughter mingling with stories of her own grandmother's kitchen. Marcus's parents shared their family recipes, passing down flavors and memories. For the first time in years, she wasn't the one orchestrating the meal. She sat in the living room, coffee in hand, watching football with the other adults, her heart full as the house buzzed with shared effort. Dinner stretched over 3 hours, not because the food demanded itum, but because no one wanted to leave the table. Conversations flowed, stories unfolded, laughter rang out. There were no phones snapping photos for likes, no rushed exits for other plans. When cleanup began, she started to rise, muscle memory kicking in. But Sarah's hand on her shoulder stopped her. "You're retired from cleanup," Sarah said with a smile, her tone firm but warm. Sitting back with a slice of pie, watching her family scrub dishes together, she felt something shift deep within her. Not relief from work, but the profound joy of being valued for who she was, not what she did. Her book, The Last Thanksgiving, A Grandmother's Guide to Family Boundaries, became a bestseller in 6 months. Its pages filled with her story and the voices of others who'd found their own strength. Writing it had been her hardest and most freeing act, a testament to the power of speaking truth. The lesson she'd learned that first Thanksgiving, that love should build, not break, that worth isn't tied to service, was worth more than all the turkey and stuffing in the world. And as she looked at her family, at the world she'd helped shift, she knew it was a lesson that would ripple forward, changing lives long after her own. The publication of my book marked a turning point, not just for me, but for countless others whose lives it touched. Critics, like those at Publishers Weekly, described it as a profound dive into the complexities of family dynamics and the struggle for self-worth, striking a chord with anyone who'd ever felt undervalued by those they held dearest. Yet its true impact transcended reviews or sales numbers. It was the flood of letters and emails from readers, strangers who became kindred spirits, that revealed the book's real power. They shared stories of how my words became a spark, igniting transformations in their lives, helping them reclaim their sense of self from the weight of familial expectations. Across the country, my story gave rise to support groups for those grappling with family exploitation. These weren't just meetings, they were sanctuaries where people could voice their exhaustion, their guilt, and their longing for fairness without judgment. Therapists began prescribing my book to clients wrestling with setting boundaries in their family relationships, using it as a guide to navigate the murky waters of obligation and love. Social workers embraced it as a tool for elder advocacy, recognizing its insights into the often unseen burdens placed on aging parents and grandparents. One of the most heartwarming outcomes was the emergence of reciprocity Thanksgiving movements in cities nationwide. Community organizations hosted holiday gatherings where every attendee contributed, whether it was a dish, decorations, entertainment, or help with cleanup. No single person was left to shoulder the entire burden of creating the celebration. These events weren't just about Thanksgiving. They were a blueprint for healthier ways to build community and family ties, proving that joy and abundance could flourish when everyone shared the load. The gathering showed that no one needed to burn themselves out to create moments of connection. Love could be a collective effort, not a one-sided sacrifice. The book's release opened doors to speaking engagements that took me to conference halls, university auditoriums, and community centers across the nation. I stood before social workers, family therapists, elder care advocates, and everyday people whose family dynamics felt like a relentless drain. Each audience was different, but my message remained constant. Healthy relationships thrive on reciprocity, respect, and a recognition of each person's inherent value. Family should lift you up, not deplete you. Love should nourish your soul, not leave you hollow. I also emphasize that change was always within reach, no matter one's age or circumstances. It was never too late to draw boundaries, to demand respect, or to teach others how to love you in a way that honored your worth. Some of the most inspiring stories came from people in their 80s and 90s who found the strength to say enough to mistreatment from their adult children. One woman, 82 years old, shared how she stopped hosting family gatherings until her children agreed to share the responsibilities and costs. Her voice trembled with pride as she described the relief of no longer carrying the weight alone. An elderly man, nearing 90, told me he'd moved into a senior living community to shift the dynamic with his adult children, forcing them to visit for his companionship rather than his labor. A great-grandmother, at 90, turned her lifelong passion for quilting into a small business, charging her family for her creations and gaining a measure of financial independence that freed her from their reluctant support. Their courage fueled my own, pushing me to keep speaking, to challenge the cultural norms that enable exploitation, and to advocate for a world where love doesn't come at the cost of one's dignity. Through my research and conversations, I came to understand how deeply gender and age intertwine to create vulnerabilities to family exploitation. The majority of those who reached out to me were women, especially older women, who had been conditioned to believe their worth lay in their service to others. Society had taught us that being a good mother, wife, or grandmother meant being selfless, that putting others' needs first was not just expected, but noble. We measured our value by how much we could give, how many people we could please, how many problems we could solve. But no one taught us that healthy relationships require balance, that love should flow both ways, that our own needs were just as valid as anyone else's. These messages were woven into the fabric of our culture: greeting cards lauding mothers for their endless sacrifices, social media posts glorifying grandparents who did everything for their families, holiday traditions that placed the burden of creating magic on one person's shoulders. My story resonated because it dared to question these assumptions, suggesting that the grandmother cooking for 28 people wasn't necessarily blessed with a gift for hospitality. She might simply be trapped in a cycle of being taken for granted. Mental health professionals responded with enthusiasm that validated my work in ways I hadn't anticipated. Therapists shared how they used my book in their practices, helping clients identify patterns of exploitation in their families and develop strategies to establish healthier boundaries. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a family therapist in California, wrote to me, explaining that my book had become essential reading for her clients struggling with what she termed caregiver burnout in family systems. She described clients, mostly women, who arrived at therapy feeling guilty for their exhaustion, unable to pinpoint why they felt so drained by their family roles. My story, she said, gave them permission to acknowledge they were being taken advantage of. It helped them see that feeling used wasn't a personal failing, but a natural response to unbalanced relationships. Her words, and those of other professionals, meant more to me than any bestseller list or media spotlight. They confirmed that my experience wasn't just a personal struggle, but part of a broader pattern affecting countless families and individuals. 2 years after my story went viral, an unexpected invitation arrived that left me both stunned and deeply moved. My daughter Sarah, whose past disregard for my boundaries had once caused so much pain, asked me to speak at her company's Women's Leadership Conference about setting boundaries and advocating for oneself in professional relationships. The irony was undeniable, but so was the significance of her request. It reflected her profound personal growth and her commitment to sharing the lessons we'd both learned through our challenging journey. Standing before that room of professional women, speaking about the skills I'd honed at 73, assertiveness, boundary setting, self-advocacy, felt like closing a sacred loop. Many of these women faced workplace dynamics that echoed family exploitation, being expected to take on extra tasks without compensation, having their time and energy treated as limitless. being praised for their natural ability to handle impossible workloads. Their questions mirrored those I'd heard from others. How do you say no without seeming ungrateful? How do you set limits without risking relationships? How do you advocate for yourself when selflessness is framed as a virtue? My answers, born of hard-won experience, were clear. Start by recognizing that your needs matter. Practice saying no to small requests to build confidence for bigger ones. Surround yourself with people who respect your boundaries, not those who profit from their absence. Most importantly, understand that healthy relationships can withstand boundary setting, while unhealthy ones crumble. And that's a truth worth knowing. The greatest gift of this journey has been the community I've found among those who value reciprocity in relationships. Through speaking engagements, book signings, and social media, I've connected with hundreds of people who have become true friends, not just admirers. Together with my friend Ellen, I started a monthly support group in our town for those navigating family boundary issues. What began as a small gathering in my living room has grown into a registered nonprofit called the Reciprocity Project. Our mission is straightforward: to help people distinguish between healthy family support and unsustainable exploitation, and to equip them with tools to create more balanced, fulfilling relationships. The project offers resources, education, and advocacy, empowering individuals to reclaim their worth and build connections that nourish rather than deplete. Through it all, I've learned that love, when it's real, doesn't demand sacrifice. It thrives on mutual respect, shared effort, and the courage to demand better. In a support group filled with people from all ages, we wrestle with the complex, often painful threads of family dynamics. Some are adult children, their hearts heavy with guilt yet resolute, finding the courage to say no to parents who've relied on them for relentless financial support, yearning for independence. Others are grandparents, their weariness from years of unpaid childcare bubbling up, now setting boundaries with a mix of pride and unease, reclaiming their time for themselves. Siblings, too, stepping away from being the family's default crisis solver, feeling lighter but still navigating the emotional shift. And spouses, quietly determined, refusing to no longer shoulder their partner's emotional turmoil, seeking a partnership that feels like a shared path rather than a one-way load. What unites us is a shared truth. Love should feel uplifting, not draining. Healthy relationships demand mutual respect, where everyone's value lies in who they are, not what they can give. On my 75th birthday, my family threw me a party that beautifully reflected how much our relationships had evolved. For years, I'd been the one orchestrating my own celebrations, planning menus, decorating, hosting, hiding my exhaustion behind a forced smile. But this time, my children, Sarah and Michael, took charge. They rented a warm community center, its soft lights and gentle hum of conversation far removed from the frantic kitchen I'd once ruled. They brought in caterers, freeing me from the stove, and invited friends and family who came to honor me, not to be served by for me. The evening unfolded with speeches, each one celebrating my advocacy, work, my writing, and the quiet ways I'd shaped lives. I sat there, my heart swelling with a gratitude I hadn't known I could feel, marveling at how love could be so effortless when given freely. But the moment that etched itself into my soul came when it was my teenage granddaughter, Emma, stood to raise her a glass. Her voice, steady yet brimming with emotion, pierced the room. "I want to thank my grandma," she began, her eyes locking with mine with a sincerity that stole my breath. "Not just for everything she's done for us over the years, but for showing us how to be better." She spoke of how, before my story rippled through our family, and she'd seen me as a fixture, someone whose purpose was to make holidays magical, to absorb their troubles, to always be there, ready to give. I didn't realize I'd seen grandparents as real people, she confessed, her voice softening with a hint of regret. People with their own dreams, struggles, their own lives. Watching me draw lines and demand respect reshaped her view of love. It wasn't about one person pouring themselves out while others took endlessly. True love meant mutual care, lifting each other up, ensuring everyone felt seen and valued. "Thank you, Grandma," she said, her words heavy with conviction, "for showing us what love means, to love yourself enough to demand better." For better. teaching us that family should build each other up, not break each other down, and for proving it's never too late to grow. As tears welled, I realized the deepest impact of my story might not be those it helped in my generation, but the young ones it taught to love differently from the start. My story began 3 Novembers ago with a quiet, seismic realization. I deserved better than I'd accepted for. It grew through the courage to voice hard truths even when my voice trembled, and it blossomed into the truth that authenticity, though hard, creates deeper connections than performance ever could. To anyone who sees themselves here, worn by family patterns that take more than they give, know this: change is possible. Possible. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're a claim to your worth. Worth. Your needs, time and energy, they matter. Matter. You deserve love for who you are, not just what you do. That last Thanksgiving, as the family's unpaid servant, was my last. But it was also my first step toward a life where love feels like love. Family means standing together, and being needed is balanced by being valued. Valued. That's the truest recipe of all.